Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the nine-tailed Pharaoh, the master of the Egyptian gods, Naruto x Ishizu Ishtar, Yu-Gi-Oh! But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Awakening of a Pep. Golden light filtered through alabaster windows, casting long shadows across the polished limestone floor of the royal preparation chamber. Prince Menifer Street, Ood motionless as attendants applied the final touches of kohl around his unusual azure eyes that had marked him as different from birth. At 16, his frame had already developed the lean musculature of a seasoned warrior rather than a pampered prince, testament to his insistence on training alongside the Medjay guards against his father's wishes. The sacred oils have been blessed by the high priests of both Horus and Anubis. My prince, murmured the chief attendant, an elderly man whose hands trembled slightly as he presented an ornate alabaster jar. They say this will shield your ka during the ritual. Menifer's expression remained impassive, though his mind raced with calculations and possibilities. The naming ceremony was traditionally a formality, a ritual where young royals communed briefly with their guardian deity. But the court astrologers had been agitated for weeks, charting unusual stellar alignments and whispering about disruptions in the cosmic balance of Ma'at. "And what do you say, Nebti?" Menifer asked, his voice deeper than expected for his age. He had learned long ago that servants often possessed wisdom the high priests lacked. The old man's eyes widened at being directly addressed. I would say that strange winds blow from the western deserts, my prince. The temple cats refuse to enter the sanctuary, and the sacred ibises have abandoned their nests. He hesitated. Some speak of shadows moving against the light. Menifer nodded once, dismissing the nervous attendants with a subtle gesture. Once alone, he removed a small copper dagger from beneath his ceremonial kilt, a weapon considered sacrilegious in a purification chamber. Whispers of invasion had reached him through his own network of informants scattered throughout Lower Egypt. The Hyksos were mobilizing along the northeastern border, and their commanders allegedly possessed strange shadow powers, magic unlike anything seen along the Nile. He slipped the dagger into it in sheath sewn into his ceremonial garments. Breaking tradition was preferable to breaking his oath to protect Egypt. Planning to sacrifice something other than incense, little brother? Came a silken voice from the doorway. Menifer didn't startle. He'd sensed Amenhotep's approach by the distinctive scent of lotus oil and ambition that always accompanied his half-brother. "The gods appreciate preparation," he replied evenly, turning to face the older prince. Amenhotep, tall and classically handsome with the traditional obsidian eyes of the royal line, leaned against a painted column with practiced nonchalance. "Father believes you'll commune with Horus today. The court astrologers predict Sekhmet." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I, however, wonder if any god will answer your call at all. Given your mother's heritage." The barb was expected. Menifer's mother had been a foreign priestess. Some whispered she came from lands far beyond the known kingdoms, bringing strange magic in her blood. She had died in childbirth, leaving Menifer with only her unusual eyes and the golden markings on his skin that appeared when he experienced strong emotions, markings that resembled whiskers across his cheeks. "We shall see what we shall see," Menifer replied, refusing to rise to the provocation. "The gods choose their vessels for reasons beyond our understanding." Indeed, Amenhotep straightened, all pretense of casualness evaporating. "Father is ill, brother. This ceremony takes on additional significance." The unspoken message hung between them, with the pharaoh weakening and invaders threatening. Whichever prince received the strongest divine blessing today would likely be named heir. Menifer had never coveted the throne, but he understood what would happen to Egypt if his brother's particular brand of cruelty were given royal sanction. "Then let us not keep the gods waiting," Menifer said, walking past his brother without another glance. As they enter the grand colonnade leading to the temple complex, the brothers were joined by their respective retinues, Amenhotep surrounded by fawning nobles and priests, Menifer accompanied by only two figures, Sanbi, his grizzled combat instructor, and Tausret, a young priestess who specialized in healing magic and had become his reluctant advisor on spiritual matters. "You're carrying a weapon," Tausret hissed under her breath, her copper-colored eyes narrowing with disapproval. Unlike most temple priestesses, she wore her black hair cropped short, and her linen robes were hemmed with protective hieroglyphics rather than decorative patterns. And you're carrying 3 hidden knives and that curved wand you claim is only for ceremonial purposes, Menifer countered without looking at her. Sinbi, a bear of a man whose body bore the scars of a dozen campaigns, chuckled softly. The prince learned observation before he learned swordplay, priestess. Tausret's mouth tightened. This isn't about breaking temple protocol, Menifer. The ritual space must remain purified. The energies we're working with today are volatile. More volatile than the Hyksos massing at our borders with shadow summoners. Menifer asked quietly. That silenced her, though her expression remained troubled. Information about the invaders was supposed to remain confidential to prevent panic. Menifer's knowledge of state secrets no longer surprised her, but his casual revelation of them sometimes did. The temple of Amun-Ra loomed before them, its massive pylons casting long shadows across the processional way. Incense smoke formed a fragrant haze above the complex, and the rhythmic chanting of priests created a hypnotic backdrop to their approach. Despite himself, Menifer felt a shiver of anticipation ripple across his skin. Beneath his calm exterior, golden energy pulsed through his veins, something he'd learned to control since childhood but never fully understood. As they approached the sanctuary, High Priest Akhenaten stepped forward to meet them. The elderly priest wore the golden mask of Amun, but his single visible eye studied Menifer with particular intensity. The stars speak of transformation today, Akhenaten intoned. The ritual has been modified in accordance with the signs. Menifer noted the hesitation. Modified how, High Priest? Instead of communing with the gods individually, you and Prince Amenhotep will participate in a shadow game ritual, calling forth your divine patrons simultaneously. In these dangerous times, Egypt needs to know which prince carries the strongest divine favor. Sinbi stepped forward, protocol forgotten. A shadow game. Those rituals were sealed away during the reign of Pharaoh Narmer. They're too dangerous. Silence. Akhenaten commanded. The decision has been made by the divine Pharaoh himself. The shadow games will reveal the true nature of each prince's Ka and Ba. Menifer placed a restraining hand on Sinbi's arm. It's all right, he said. Though his mind was racing. Shadow games were legendary, rituals where the boundaries between the mortal realm and the divine were temporarily dissolved. Participants didn't merely commune with the gods. They channeled their actual power, with all the attendant risks to their mortal forms. Tausret moved closer, her voice barely a whisper. This is Amenhotep's doing. His Factio N has been pushing to reinstate the old ways. Shadow games can kill participants whose spirits aren't strong enough, or whose gods reject them. Menifer completed the thought. He met Akhenaten's gaze steadily. I accept the challenge, High Priest. Inside the inner sanctuary, all natural light had been extinguished. 7 ceremonial fires burned in copper braziers, each flame a different color: red, blue, green, purple, white, black, and gold. The air thrummed with magical energy, making the fine hairs on Menifer's arms stand on end. An altar of black granite dominated the center of the chamber, its surface inscribed with hieroglyphics so ancient even Menifer, fluent in multiple written forms, could only recognize portions of the text. Surrounding the altar, high priests from each major temple had gathered, their faces hidden behind divine masks. Remove your sandals and approach the altar, commanded the high priestess of Isis, her melodious voice echoing strangely in the chamber. Menifer and Amenhotep complied, the cool stone beneath their feet a stark contrast to the increasingly oppressive heat emanating from the braziers. As they faced each other across the altar, Menifer noticed golden energy crackling around the ceremonial dagger placed between them, a ritual implement meant to symbolically separate the physical and spiritual realms. In the time before time, WHN gods walked freely upon the Black Land, their power flowed through chosen vessels, intoned Akhenaten, raising his arms. Today, we call upon that ancient covenant. May the divine choose their champion and make their will known. The priests began a low, rhythmic chanting, the sound seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. The fires flared simultaneously, sending shadows dancing across the walls in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, hieroglyphics forming and dissolving too quickly to comprehend. Amenhotep's expression remained triumphant, confident. Menifer maintained his composure. Though internally his senses were heightened to an almost painful degree. Something felt wrong. The energy building in the chamber didn't match the prescribed ritual he'd studied in preparation. The high priestess approached with a golden chalice. "Drink," she commanded. "Open your ka to divine possession." Amenhotep took the vessel first, drinking deeply before passing it to Menefer. The liquid inside was thick and metallic, ceremonial wine mixed with substances Menefer couldn't identify. As he brought it to his lips, his enhanced senses detected something beneath the expected herbs and incense, a subtle poison. In that split second, Menefer made his decision. With movements too quick for ordinary eyes to follow, he tilted the chalice in a way that made it appear he was drinking while actually allowing the liquid to merely touch his lips. He handed the vessel back, mimicking his brother's slightly glazed expression. Now, Akhenaten's voice rose above the chanting, "Place our hands upon the ritual blade and call forth your divine patron." Both princes placed their palms on the ceremonial dagger. The moment Menefer's skin touched the metal, blinding pain shot through his body. The chamber disappeared from his perception, replaced by an endless desert beneath a blood-red sky. Before him towered massive golden gates inscribed with symbols he instinctively recognized as a divine sealing formula. Someone has tampered with the ritual, Menefer realized with perfect clarity despite the pain. They're not calling gods, they're trying to break a seal. From behind the gates, a low growl reverberated through the spiritual landscape, shaking the very foundations of this metaphysical realm. Two massive, slitted eyes the color of molten gold appeared in the darkness beyond the gates. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" The voice wasn't heard so much as felt, each word carrying the weight of millennia. Despite his training, despite his iron self-control, Menefer felt primal terror course through him. Whatever entity lay behind those gates was no ordinary Egyptian deity. Its power was older, wilder, something from before the pantheons were formalized. "I am Prince Menefer of the House of Ramesses," he stated, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I did not intend to disturb you. The ritual has been corrupted." A rumbling sound that might have been laughter shook the desert. "Corrupted, or perhaps, corrected. The seal weakens, little prince. Someone wishes me free." The eyes drew closer to the gate, and Menefer could now discern a massive vulp. In form, a creature like a jackal or fox, but far larger than any mortal beast. Most disturbingly, 9 massive tails undulated behind it, each seemingly capable of independent movement. "Who are you?" Menefer asked, though part of him already knew the answer, a name spoken only in the oldest, forbidden texts. "I am Apep, devourer of souls, bringer of chaos. Enemy of Ra, they called me. Demon, they named me. God, I became." The creature's massive face pressed against the gates, causing them to creak ominously. "And soon I shall be free. Your brother's ambition has provided the vessel, his body shall host my return." Menefer's mind raced. The shadow game wasn't meant to connect them with patron deities, it was a possession ritual. Amenhotep or his supporters had somehow discovered this sealed god and planned to harness its power. But they clearly didn't understand what they were unleashing. "You're the 9-tailed destroyer from the First Dynasty texts," Menefer said, ancient lessons falling into place. "Sealed away because you threatened to consume all of Egypt in shadows. Clever child. They betrayed me. The gods who once called me brother. Jealous of my power, they bound me here between realms. But time weakens all bindings." The gates groaned, golden light spilling through widening cracks. In the physical world, Menefer knew, his brother was probably Ilrea. Being overtaken by this entity's influence. If Apep possessed Amenhotep and gained the throne of Egypt, thousands would die. The balance of Ma'at would be shattered. In that moment, Menefer made a decision that would alter the course of his life and Egypt's history. "Take me instead," he said. The massive eyes blinked. "Explain, little prince." "My brother seeks only power. He would be consumed by your energy, leaving only destruction in his wake." Menefer stood straighter, facing the ancient god without flinching. "I offer myself as an alternative vessel. Not as your slave, but as your partner. Balance instead of dominance." The creature seemed to consider this, its tails lashing with growing agitation as the gates continued to splinter. "You would willingly bond with chaos incarnate." knowing it will forever change you. To protect my people, yes. Noble, foolish, intriguing. Apep's massive snout drew back slightly from the gates. What makes you think you could contain me when the combined might of the Pantheon barely managed it? Menifer reached deep within himself, drawing on the strange golden energy that had flowed through his veins since birth. The power his mother's bloodline had given him, which he'd always hidden from others. He allowed it to surface now, golden markings appearing on his skin, his eyes shifting from azure to a deep crimson. Because I am already something other than fully human, he answered truthfully. My mother came from lands far beyond Egypt, lands where fox spirits are revered rather than feared. Her bloodline gives me the capacity to channel your power without being destroyed by it. Apep's eyes narrowed, studying the energy patterns now visible around Menifer. Fascinating. The old magic from the eastern lands. I have not seen its like since before my imprisonment. A tremendous crack echoed through the spiritual realm as the gates began to give way. You have little choice, Menifer pressed. The ritual is breaking down. If you attempt to possess Amenhotep now, the high priests will destroy his body before the transition is complete. You'll be cast back into the void. The massive entity growled, clearly recognizing the truth in Menifer's words. There would be terms to such an arrangement. Name them. I will not be caged within you as I was behind these gates. I require access to your senses, your experiences. Agreed, but I remain in control of my actions. You will draw upon my power in times of need. Acceptable, but I determine what constitutes need. You will reveal my existence to no one until the time is right. Agreed. With a final tremendous crack, the gates shattered. Instead of rushing toward freedom, however, Apep's massive foe, condensed into a swirling vortex of golden energy. Then let it be so, Prince Mennefer. From this day forward, your destiny and mine are intertwined. The energy surged forward, enveloping Nefer in blinding light and excruciating pain. Every cell in his body seemed to burn from within as divine power merged with his mortal form. His last conscious thought was a prayer that he had made the right decision. In the physical world, chaos had erupted in the temple sanctuary. The moment the princes touched the ceremonial dagger, unnatural winds had begun howling through the chamber, extinguishing the sacred flames. Priests scattered as arcane energy crackled across the altar, the stone itself beginning to crack under the pressure of forces it was never meant to contain. Amenhotep collapsed first, foam gathering at the corners of his mouth, his body convulsing violently. High Priest Akhenaten rushed to his side, genuine shock replacing his usual calculated demeanor. This was clearly not the outcome he had anticipated. What's happening? Demanded Tausret, fighting against the supernatural wind to reach Menifer, who remained upright but completely rigid, his eyes glowing with an unearthly golden light. Treachery, shouted Senbi, drawing his sword and advancing on Akhenaten. You've poisoned the princes. Before anyone could react further, Menifer's body erupted in gall. Flames that somehow burned without consuming. The whisker-like markings on his cheeks deepened and darkened, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried an otherworldly resonance that silenced every person in the chamber. The shadow game has ended, he announced, each word seeming to echo with ancient power. I have been judged worthy. Akhenaten rose shakily to his feet. Impossible, he whispered. The ritual was calibrated for Prince Amenhotep too. He stopped himself, but too late. Senbi's blade was at his throat instantly. To what? The warrior demanded. What have you done, priest? Menifer raised a hand, the gesture somehow commanding absolute attention despite its subtlety. He attempted to break an ancient seal, to unleash a power that would have destroyed Egypt. His gaze dropped to his unconscious brother. Amenhotep will live, but he will never channel divine energy again. His Ka has been cauterized. The high priests exchanged horrified glances. Such an outgo. Me was unprecedented. A prince rendered spiritually sterile, incapable of communing with the gods. What god has chosen you, Prince Menifer? Asked the high priestess of Isis, her voice trembling slightly. Menifer's expression remained impassive, though those closest to him might have detected the slightest hesitation. That is between me and the divine. Know only that I stand now as Egypt's shield against the coming darkness. As if summoned by his words, a palace guard burst into the sanctuary, protocol forgotten in his panic. Invaders, he gasped. The Hyksos have broken through the eastern defenses with shadow creatures. They march on the palace. 3,000 years later. Dr. Ishizu Ishtar brushed sand from her brow, careful not to disturb the delicate hieroglyphics she was photographing. The hidden chamber beneath the Valley of the Kings had remained untouched for millennia, its entrance revealed only after an unusually violent sandstorm had shifted tons of desert from its ancient resting place. "This doesn't make any sense," she murmured, tracing the symbols with a gloved finger. "These cartouches refer to a pharaoh who doesn't exist in any known dynasty records." Her brother Merrick adjusted the LED lighting panel, casting the wall in sharper relief. Perhaps he was erased from history. It wouldn't be the first time. "No, this is different." Ishizu's dark eyes narrowed in concentration. "Look at the honorifics. The nine-tailed one, master of divine beasts, he who walks between realms. This isn't standard pharaonic titulary. The chamber itself was unlike any tomb they'd excavated before. Instead of the expected funerary arrangements, the walls depicted scenes of battle, a young pharaoh with distinctive facial markings commanding what appeared to be living shadows against invading armies. Most curiously, the traditional Egyptian deities were shown in submissive postures around his throne, as if he commanded them rather than served them. "There's something else strange," Merrick noted, directing his light toward the chamber's center. "No sarcophagus, but that definitely looks like a ceiling circle. In the center of the room, an intricate design had been carved into the stone floor, a nine-pointed star surrounded by hieroglyphics so ancient even Ishizu, one of Egypt's foremost experts, struggled to interpret them. At each point of the star sat a small alabaster statue of a seated fox. Not a tomb, Ishizu realized suddenly. A prison. She moved closer to examine one of the fox figurines. Unlike the other artifacts, these showed no signs of age or deterioration. Their alabaster surfaces gleamed as if newly polished, their eyes inlaid with gold that seemed to catch the light at impossible angles. "Don't touch those," warned Drive Sayeg, the Antiquities Ministry official who had reluctantly granted them access to the site. His usual bureaucratic pomposity had given way to genuine unease since they'd entered the chamber. "Something about them feels wrong." Quote, Ishizu normally respected such intuitive reactions to artifacts. Egyptian archaeologists grew up with a healthy respect for the tangible power of ancient objects. But her scientific curiosity overwhelmed her caution. This chamber represented a historical anomaly that could rewrite their understanding of Egypt's divine kingship traditions. "I just want to document the hieroglyphics on the base," she explained, kneeling beside the nearest figurine. The symbols were microscopic, requiring her to lean in closely. As her face neared the statue, she could have sworn its golden eyes tracked her movement. A chill ran down her spine, but scientific rationality quickly suppressed it. "Trick of the light," she told herself. "This inscription references the binding of Apep's 9 aspects." She translated aloud. "But that's strange. Apep was the serpent of chaos in Egyptian mythology, not a fox deity." The moment the name, Apep, left her lips, a tremor shook the chamber. Fine sand drifted from the ceiling as the vibrations intensified. "Earthquake!" shouted Drive Sayeg, already moving toward the narrow entrance shaft. "We need to evacuate immediately." Merrick grabbed their essential equipment while Ishizu hurriedly photographed the ceiling circle. As she backed away, her elbow accidentally brushed against one of the fox statues, knocking it slightly askew. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Golden light erupted from the displaced figurine, quickly spreading to the others. The hieroglyphics around the ceiling circle began to glow with the same unearthly radiance. And the tremors increased tenfold, sending all 3 archaeologists sprawling. "What have you done?" screamed Sayeg above the rumbling. Ishizu couldn't answer, transfixed by what was happening before her. The 9-pointed star was now a blinding sigil of golden energy, pulsating like a heartbeat. From its center, a column of light shot upward, piercing through the bedrock ceiling as if it were paper. Merrick dragged her toward the exit as chunks of stone began falling around them. "Ishizu, we have to go now." With tremendous effort, she tore her gaze from the phenomenon and scrambled toward the shaft. They barely escaped the chamber before the entire structure collapsed behind them, sealing whatever they had inadvertently awakened beneath tons of rock once more. On the surface, chaos reigned. The energy beam continued skyward, visible for miles across the desert, a golden pillar connecting earth to heavens. Teams of archaeologists and workers from boring excavations gathered at a safe distance, staring in disbelief. "Are you hurt?" Merrick asked, checking his sister for injuries. Ishizu shook her head, unable to take her eyes off the column of light. "It's not destroying anything," she observed. "It's searching." As if confirming her words, the beam suddenly angled away from its vertical trajectory, bending impossibly to shoot horizontally across the desert toward Cairo. Just as abruptly as it had appeared, it vanished, leaving stunned silence in its wake. Ishizu's hand went unconsciously to the Millennium Necklace concealed beneath her collar, an ancient artifact that occasionally granted her visions of past and future. It felt unusually warm against her skin. "It's happening again," she whispered, too quietly for anyone but herself to hear. "The Shadow Games are returning. Prince Mennefer, now simply Mennefer as he had renounced his claim to the throne 3 days prior, stood alone on the palace balcony overlooking the Nile. Dawn painted the river gold, mirroring the energy that now permanently coursed through his veins. In the short time since the ritual, his body had changed subtly but significantly, his senses sharper, his reflexes inhumanly quick. His capacity for channeling magical energy expanded beyond what even the high priests thought possible. "They fear you now, a Pep's voice resonated in his mind. "A constant companion since their bonding." "With good reason," Mennefer replied softly. "I'm not entirely sure what I've become." The battle against the Hyksos invaders had ended almost as quickly as it began. When their shadow creatures breached the palace walls, Mennefer had stepped forward alone, against the desperate protests of the royal guard. What happened next had already spawned a dozen different rumors throughout Thebes. Witnesses described golden chakra energy forming around the prince in the shape of a massive fox. Others claimed he summoned actual divine beasts that tore through the enemy ranks. The Hyksos shadow summoners had simply disintegrated, their magic absorbed by Mennefer's aura. The surviving invaders fled in terror, spreading tales of Egypt's god prince across the known world. "You've become what you were always meant to be, Apep responded with something almost like pride. "Neither fully human nor fully divine, a bridge between realms." The door behind him opened quietly, and Mennefer didn't need to turn to know it was Tausret. Her scent, lotus oil and medicinal herbs, had become instantly recognizable to his enhanced senses. "The Pharaoh has summoned the High Council," she said without preamble. "They're discussing your situation." Mennefer nodded but didn't immediately respond. After a moment, he asked, "How is my brother?" "Recovering physically, mentally." She hesitated. "He refuses to speak. The physicians believe the trauma of the failed ritual has affected his mind." "And what do you believe, priestess?" Mennefer turned to face her, curious about her perception of recent events. Tausret's copper eyes studied him with clinical intensity. "I believe you're hosting an entity far more powerful and dangerous than you've admitted. I believe you sacrificed your birthright to save Egypt from whatever Akhenaten and your brother attempted to unleash." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "And I believe you're struggling to control it." Mennefer's expression remained neutral, but internally, he felt Apep's energy surge in response to her accusation. "What makes you say that? Your aura has changed. There are fluctuations when you're emotional." Her hand reached toward his face but stopped short of touching the whisker-like markings that had deepened since the ritual. "And these appear and fade with your energy levels." "She's observant," Apep commented, "and unafraid." "Interesting. The council fears what they don't understand," Tausret continued. "Some are calling for your exile, claiming you've been corrupted by foreign magic. Others wish to study you, to understand and potentially weaponize your abilities." "And what do you recommend, healer?" Mennefer asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Tausret's professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing genuine concern beneath. "I recommend you tell me the truth, so I can actually help you before you burn from the inside out. Divine energy in mortal vessels is inherently unstable. Whatever you've bonded with is changing your physical form." Mennefer considered her words carefully. While his agreement with Apep precluded full disclosure, he needed allies who understood at least part of what he faced. "I made a choice during the ritual," he finally said. "When I realized Akhenaten and Amenhotep were attempting to unleash a sealed deity, I redirected the connection. The entity they sought to control now resides within me instead. Tausret's eyes widened. You willingly accepted possession by an ancient god. Not possession. Partnership. Menifer's eyes briefly flashed gold. There's a distinction. Before Tausret could respond, Sinbi appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. My prince, he said with a quick bow. Forgive the interruption, but there's a situation in the temple district. Some kind of creature has appeared. What manner of creature? Menifer was already moving, instinctive. Eagerly reaching for the copper dagger he now carried openly. The reports are confused. Something with the body of a woman but the wings of a massive bird. It's demanding to speak with Apep's vessel. Tausret gasped softly, while Menifer felt the fox god's energy surge with recognition. Nekbet, ***, Apep growled within Menifer's mind. The vulture goddess comes to test your worthiness. Tell no one else of this. Menifer instructed Sinbi. I'll handle it personally. As they hurried through the palace corridors, Tausret kept pace beside him. You're going to face a goddess alone, she demanded. Even with your new powers, that's suicide. Not alone, Menifer replied quietly. Never alone. Now, they emerged from the palace to find the sky darkening unnaturally over the temple district. Massive storm clouds had gathered, swirling in patterns that defied natural weather formations. Lightning with a distinctly golden hue arced between the clouds, and the air crackled with divine energy. She's not alone, Apep warned. I sense others watching, testing. The Pantheon has noticed our bond. Citizens fled the streets as Menifer's small group advanced toward the temple. The normally bustling market squares stood abandoned, goods left behind in the panic. Only the occasional whimper from those hiding inside buildings broke the eerie silence. As they approached the Temple of Mut, the source of the disturbance became apparent. Hovering above the sanctuary, a massive figure combined the features of a regal woman and an enormous vulture. Her wingspan cast half the temple complex in shadow, and her eyes burned with divine fire as they fixed on Menifer. Vessel of Apep, her voice thundered across the city. You dare walk freely while bearing chaos within. Approach and be judged. Sinbi moved protectively in front of Menifer, but the prince gently moved him aside. Return to the palace, he ordered both his companions. What happens next is not for mortal witnesses. I'm staying, Tausret stated flatly, as your physician and spiritual advisor. And I as your shield, added Sinbi, hand on his sword despite the futility of conventional weapons against a goddess. Menifer didn't argue further, partly because he respected their loyalty, and partly because Apep's energy was already building within him, demanding release. Golden chakra began, swirling around his form as he stepped forward to address the divine challenger. I am Menifer, son of Ramesses, he called, his voice carrying unnatural resonance. I stand before you not as Apep's vessel but as his partner. Judge me if you must, Nekbet, but know that I act with Egypt's protection as my only goal. The goddess descended, her form shrinking as she approached until she stood before them in a more human aspect, still towering at twice Menifer's height but no longer city-spanning. Up close, her features were both beautiful and terrible, ageless wisdom and predatory calculation evident in every line of her face. Pretty words from a mortal playing with forces beyond comprehension, she hissed, her voice now softer but no less menacing. Apep was sealed for good reason, child. His chaos nearly destroyed creation itself during the First Age. Let me speak to her, ***, Apep demanded within Menifer's mind. For the first time since their bonding, Menifer hesitated to comply with the fox god's request. Surrendering control, even momentarily, risked everything he hoped to accomplish. I will not betray you, partner, ***, Apep assured him, seeming to sense his reluctance. But Nekbet will accept nothing less than direct communication. With great caution, Menifer relaxed his hold on their shared consciousness, allowing Apep's essence to flow more freely through their connection. The change was immediately visible. His posture straightened, his eyes shifted fully to gold with slitted pupils, and the whisker markings on his cheeks darkened and extended. Nekbet, he spoke, but the voice carried dual tones, Menifer's natural timbre overlaid with Apep's ancient resonance. You look well for someone who helped imprison me for 3,000 years. The goddess hissed, her wings flaring defensively. You should have remained sealed for eternity, chaos bringer. Yet here I stand, bound not by your Pantheon's chains but by choice to this worthy vessel. Apep, Menefer gestured expansively. The boy offered partnership when he could have simply let me possess his brother and wreak havoc. Does that not intrigue you, old friend? You have no friends among the gods, Apep. Only jailers. Former jailers, Apep corrected with Menefer's mouth. The question now is whether you'll make the same mistake twice, attempting to destroy what you could ally with. Nekbet circled them slowly, her divine senses clearly probing the unusual bond between mortal and god. This arrangement is unprecedented, she finally admitted. The boy's soul remains intact, untainted despite your presence. How is this possible? His bloodline is special, descended from eastern lands where fox spirits are revered rather than feared. His mortal grandmother was he. Rself, a vessel for a nine-tailed fox spirit of those distant kingdoms. This revelation shocked not only the goddess but Menefer himself, who had never known the full truth of his heritage. Within their shared consciousness, he directed a pointed question toward Apep. You knew my ancestry and didn't tell me. Asterisk. All in good time, partner, asterisk asterisk, came the private reply. Some truths are better revealed strategically. Nekbet seemed to be considering this new information carefully. The Council of Gods will demand restrictions, she finally said. Safeguards against Apep's influence growing too strong. We welcome oversight, Apep, Menefer replied smoothly. But not control. My vessel has already renounced his claim to Egypt's throne to avoid political complications. He seeks only to protect the Black Land from threats both mortal and divine. A convenient claim, Nekbet scoffed. Test us, then, came the challenge. The Hyksos invasion was merely the vanguard. Their Shadow S. Umoners serve entities from the Dark Realms, rivals to both your pantheon and my power. Send us against them, and judge us by our actions rather than ancient prejudices. For a long moment, divine judgment hung in the balance. Then, with a sound like thunder, Nekbet slammed her staff against the temple stones. So be it. You will have your trial by combat, Apep's vessel. The Hyksos marshal agree. Ader force even now, creatures of shadow and corruption that threaten to overwhelm the eastern borders. Face this threat and prove your claim as Egypt's protector. With those words, the goddess dissolved into a swirl of feathers and light, vanishing as suddenly as she had appeared. The unnatural storm clouds dispersed, allowing natural sunlight to reclaim the city. Menefer felt control of his body returned fully as Apep's presence receded to its usual background state. He staggered slightly, the divine confrontation having drained his energy significantly. Tausret was at his side instantly, supporting him with surprising strength for her slender frame. What just happened? She demanded, her professional composure cracking under the weight of what she'd witnessed. An alliance, Menefer replied, his voice hoarse. Or at least the beginning of one. Sinbi sheathed his sword, which he had kept drawn throughout the confrontation despite its uselessness. The goddess mentioned another Hyksos attack, he said grimly. How much time do we have? Menefer looked eastward, his enhanced senses somehow detecting disturbances far beyond normal perception. Not enough, he answered. But more than we had before. As they made their way back to the palace, citizens began emerging from their hiding places, staring at Menefer with expressions ranging from terror to awe. Word of his confrontation with a goddess would spread through Thebes by nightfall, adding to the growing legends surrounding the prince who had renounced his throne but claimed a higher power. You handled that well, asterisk asterisk, Apep commented internally. Nekbet has always been among the more reasonable of the pantheon. You still haven't explained how you know about my grandmother, Menefer thought back. The gods see much from their prisons. Came the cryptic reply. Your bloodline is why I agreed to our partnership, why you alone could host my power without being consumed by it. In time, you'll understand the full significance of your heritage. Before Menefer could press further, they arrived at the palace to find it in uproar. Guards and officials rushed about with urgent purpose, and the pharaoh's personal heralds were assembling in the main courtyard. What's happening? Sinbi asked, grabbing a passing guard. The pharaoh has collapsed, the man replied, panic evident in his voice. The royal physicians say he won't last the night. The succession must be decided immediately. Tausret's eyes widened, but with Prince Amenhotep compromised, and you having renounced your claim. The throne would pass to my uncle's line, Menefer finished. Except the gods have just publicly acknowledged you as Egypt's protector, Apep completed. The priests will insist on your ascension regardless of your renunciation. The realization hit Menefer with the force of divine judgment. In trying to avoid political power to focus on Egypt's spiritual protection, he had inadvertently positioned himself as the only viable candidate for Pharaoh in the eyes of both the people and the priesthood. We need to reach the succession council before they make their proclamation, he said urgently. Already moving toward the throne room. There must be another way. But even as he rushed to prevent his own coronation, part of him, whether his ambition or Apep's, he couldn't tell, whispered that perhaps a divinely empowered pharaoh was exactly what Egypt needed to face the gathering shadows. In her Cairo apartment, Ishizu Ishtar awoke with a gasp, her body drenched in cold sweat. The dream had been so vivid. Golden eyes watching her from darkness, a voice that seemed to vibrate through her very soul, and a persistent name that echoed in her consciousness, Menefer. The millennium necklace around her throat pulsed with warmth, having triggered another vision while she slept. Unlike her usual glimpses of past or future, this had felt interactive, as if something was actively communicating with her across the millennia. She reached for her journal, faithfully recording the details before they faded from memory. As she wrote, her phone buzzed with an incoming call, Merrick. Despite the late hour, you felt it too, she said by way of greeting, requiring no preamble with her brother. The energy signature from the collapsed chamber has reappeared, he confirmed, his voice tense. Multiple locations across Cairo reported golden light manifestations in the past hour. The Egyptian Antiquities Council is in panic mode, they're calling all Khonsu. LTANTS with experience in ancient magical artifacts. Ishizu closed her eyes, centering herself. This is connected to the Shadow Games, Merrick. The ancient magic is awakening again, just as the tablets predicted. You think this relates to the pharaoh from the hidden chamber? The one with the 9 tails? I'm certain of it. She glanced at her freshly written journal entry. Whatever was sealed there has found a new vessel. I need to consult the Ishtar archives. Our ancestors may have recorded information about this, Apep, connection that isn't in the public historical record. Be careful, sister, Merrick cautioned. Remember what happened last time we interfered with the Shadow Games. After ending the call, Ishizu moved to her small home office where she kept the most sensitive Ishtar family documents, records passed down through generations of tomb keepers. Most archaeologists would give anything to access these primary sources, but the Ishtar family had maintained their secrecy for good reason. Hours passed as she pored over ancient papyri and crumbling codices, searching for references to the 9-tailed pharaoh or Apep's human vessel. As dawn approached, she finally found what she sought, a fragmentary text dating from the early dynastic period. The golden one bears the 9 aspects of chaos, she translated aloud, fingers tracing the faded hieroglyphics. Neither god nor man but bridge between realms. When darkness threatens to consume the black land, he shall return, bearing the whisker marks of divine favor. The text continued with a prophecy, in the time of metal birds and speaking stones. The seal shall weaken. The 9-tailed one shall choose a new vessel from among those who remember the old ways. The Shadow Games shall begin anew, and the fate of 2 worlds shall hang in the balance. Ishizu sat back, a chill running through her despite the warm Egyptian night. Metal birds, aircraft, speaking stones, phones or computers. The ancient prophecy was describing their modern era. But who is the vessel? She murmured. And who is doing the choosing? As if in answer, her computer screen suddenly flickered to life despite being powered off. Golden light emanated from the monitor, forming patterns that resembled both hieroglyphics and something more abstract, a language beyond human comprehension. In the center of the screen, 9 fox tails swirled in a hypnotic pattern. And a pair of slitted golden eyes opened, fixing her with an ancient, knowing gaze. Ishizu Ishtar, came a voice that seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to her mind. Keeper of memories, the time of awakening is at hand. Ishizu froze, her training as a tomb keeper warring with her instinct to flee. Who? What are you? She managed to ask. Avenue been called many names across the millennia. Apep to the Egyptians, Kyubi to the eastern lands. The nine-tailed fox to most. The eyes blinked slowly. But you may call me Kurama. The name triggered something in Ishizu's memory, fragments of Eastern mythology she'd studied during comparative religion courses. The nine-tailed fox spirit from Japanese folklore, she whispered. But what connection do you have to ancient Egypt? All fox spirits share a common ancestry, Tomb Keeper. Before the pantheons were formalized, before humans drew borders across the earth, we walked freely between realms. The entity's voice carried ancient sorrow and pride in equal measure. My Egyptian incarnation was sealed away by jealous gods. My Eastern aspect suffered a similar fate. But now the seals weaken. And I seek a worthy vessel once more. The golden energy from the chamber, Ishizu realized. It was searching for someone. The bloodline thins but persists. One walks among you with the potential to host my power without being consumed by it. You will help me find this vessel, Ishizu Ishtar. Her diplomatic training took over. And why would I assist an ancient entity that was sealed away for good reason? The fox spirit seemed amused rather than offended. Because the alternative is far worse. The shadows gather once more, Tomb Keeper. Entities from the Ark realm seek to break through the thinning barriers between worlds. Without a vessel to channel my power against them, your realm will fall. The shadow games are merely the beginning. Images flow. Oded Ishizu's mind. Visions of darkness spreading across the modern world, shadow creatures materializing in major cities, ancient sealed evils awakening beneath the earth. She gasped, gripping the EDG of her desk as the weight of these potential futures pressed against her consciousness. You know I speak truth, ***, the entity continued. You have seen glimpses through your millennium item. He necklace shows you possibilities, I show you certainties. When the barrage of images finally ceased, Ishizu found herself trembling. The logical part of her mind suggested this could be an Alabo rape trick, some hackers targeting her computer with specialized knowledge of her background. But the Millennium necklace pulsed with confirmatory warmth against her throat. If I were to help you, she said carefully. What exactly would that entail? The fox's expression seemed to shift to something almost approving. Wisdom before action. Your caution serves you well. The golden eyes narrowed slightly. I require you to locate potential vessels, those with the specific genetic markers that would allow them to channel my energy. Your access to archaeological genetic sampling makes you uniquely positioned for this task. And once this vessel is found, they must be tested, their character as well as their capability. My power in the wrong hands would indeed be catastrophic. Ishizu considered the request. If this entity, Kurama or Apep or whatever it called itself, was genuinely what it claimed, then its reemergence aligned with several ancient prophecies the Ishtar family had safeguarded for generations. The timing couldn't be coincidental, especially with the recent increase in unexplained shadow energy readings around major ley lines. I will consider your request, she finally said. But I'll need proof of your intentions. If you truly seek to protect this realm rather than dominate it, you'll have to demonstrate that somehow. The fox spirit's laugh reverberated through her mind. Cautious and demanding. You remind me of someone I once knew. The golden eyes seemed to look through her, as if accessing ancient memories. Very well, Ishizu Ishtar. Proof you shall have. When the shadows attack the Cairo Museum tomorrow night, as they will, be present. Observe how I influence events even without a proper vessel. Then decide. Before she could respond, the golden light receded, and her computer screen returned to normal. The only evidence of the encounter was a single line of text in an ancient script across her digital desktop, the 9-ta. I led Pharaoh returns when darkness falls. Ishizu reached for her phone with still trembling hands. Whatever was happening, she couldn't face it alone. The shadow games were returning, and this time, the fate of far more than Egypt hung in the balance. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, The Priestess of Neith. The falcon's cry pierced the morning sky as it soared above the royal barge. 5 years into his reign, Pharaoh Menefer stood at the vessel's prow, watching the bird's path with unusual intensity. His shoulders, broader now at 21 than in his youth, carried both physical strength and invisible weight of divine responsibility. The royal guards maintained a respectful distance, They had learned that their god king often conversed with beings they could not perceive. "Your bird returns with troubling news," Menifer said quietly, eyes tracking the falcon's descent. Sinbi, now royal protector and the only member of court permitted to approach the pharaoh uninvited, grunted acknowledgement. The weathered warrior had added more battle scars to his collection since pledging himself to the nine-tailed pharaoh. "Shadows spotted near the village?" he asked, his deep voice roughened, edged by years of shouting commands across battlefields. Not merely shadows, organized movement, calculated. Menifer's speech patterns had evolved over the years, shorter sentences, precise observations. As if human language had become an insufficient tool for expressing his thoughts. The whisker markings on his face, once barely visible, now permanently adorned his cheeks like tribal scarification. The royal barge cut through the Nile's waters with minimal disturbance. 12 oarsmen, selected for both their strength and their discretion, propelled the vessel northward toward the delta regions. No ceremonial entourage accompanied them. Menifer had insisted on speed and secrecy rather than royal pageantry for this journey. "The shadow creatures grow bolder, Apep's voice resonated within Menifer's mind. Over 5 years, their communication had evolved from separate consciousnesses into something approaching harmony, though neither entity had surrendered its distinct nature. He sensed the weakening of the divine barriers. "The temples report no disruption in ritual observances," Menifer replied internally, the mental exchange requiring no more than a thought. "The gods should be properly appeased. Appeasement and power are not the same, partner. The old pantheon wanes regardless of human devotion. Something fundamental shifts in the cosmic balance." Before Menifer could pursue this troubling line of discussion, Tausret emerged from below deck. Now high priestess of Sekhmet rather than a simple healer, she had grown into her power with remarkable determination. Her copper eyes swept the horizon with the same clinical assessment she once reserved for patients. "The Delta priestesses have sent another messenger bird," she announced without preamble. 3 more villages affected since yesterday. They describe shadows that take human form before consuming their victims. Sinbi spat over the side of the barge. "Soul eaters. Haven't seen their like since the Eastern campaigns." He touched a particular scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, a memento from a battle against creatures that had defied conventional weaponry. "Not mere soul eaters," Tausret corrected. "The reports describe organized attacks. Selective targeting. The creatures take only those with magical potential, scribes trained in hieratic script, village healers, children showing signs of divine favor." Menifer's eyes narrowed, flashing briefly gold. "Harvesting." The single word hung in the air, laden with significance. All 3 knew the forbidden ritual CES that required spiritually potent souls as components. Such magic had been outlawed since before the First Dynasty, its practitioners executed through specialized rituals that ensured their own souls could not return from the underworld. "Someone plays a dangerous game," Menifer said finally. "One the Pantheon will not ignore." "Yet they have not intervened," Tausret observed. The implied criticism of the gods would have been blasphemy from anyone else, but as both high priestess and one of the few who knew Menifer's true nature, she spoke without fear. "They cannot, Apep supplied, though only Menifer could hear. "The boundary between realms thins primarily around you, partner, a consequence of our unique bond. Where you walk, the veil weakens. The Pantheon relies on you to address what they cannot directly influence." The revelation troubled Menifer, though he kept his expression neutral. He had assumed the gods' apparent inaction stemmed from political maneuvering rather than inability. The implications required consideration, but time grew short. "We approach the first affected village," Sinbi noted, gesturing toward a cluster of mud brick buildings nestled against the Nile's edge. Even from a distance, the settlement's unnatural stillness was apparent. No fishing boats dotted the water, no children played along the banks, no smoke rose from cooking fires. Menifer raised his hand, and the oarsmen immediately steered the barge toward shore. As they approached, the true extent of the devastation became clear. Bodies lay where they had fallen, not desecrated or wounded, but unnaturally preserved, as if life had simply been extracted in an instant. Most disturbing were their expressions, eyes wide with terror, mouths opened in silent screams. "No animal has touched them," Tausret observed. kneeling beside the nearest victim, an elderly man clutching a protective amulet. No decomposition despite the heat. She looked up at Menifer, professional detachment faltering. Their casts were not merely taken, they were severed with surgical precision. I've never seen anything like it. Menifer crouched beside a child's body, gently closing the boy's staring eyes. Has any village in the region been spared? He asked. Only Perwajit, Sanbi replied. Sacred to the Cobra goddess. The messenger reported their priestesses have maintained some form of barrier. Then we go there next. Menifer decided, rising. Before whatever harvest is being conducted reaches completion. The journey to Perwajit required abandoning the royal barge for smaller reed boats that could navigate the narrower delta channels. By midday, they approached a settlement markedly different from the devastated village they had left behind. Defensive earthworks surrounded Perwajit, reinforced with wooden palisades rarely seen in stone-poor Lower Egypt. At regular intervals along the walls, copper braziers burned with green-tinged flames, magical fire designed to repel spiritual threats. Most striking, however, were the guardians who patrolled the perimeter. Women clad in scaled armor moved with disciplined precision, carrying slender spears tipped with citrum, a metal alloy sacred to the goddess Wadjet. Each warrior's forehead bore a painted cobra sigil, and their expressions conveyed the focused intensity of those who had already faced the enemy and survived. As Menifer's small party approached the village gates, the warriors immediately formed a defensive formation, spears leveled with practiced coordination. Identify yourselves, commanded, a voice accustomed to unquestioned obedience. Sanbi stepped forward, hands deliberately kept visible and away from his weapons. Royal envoy from Pharaoh Menifer, Lord of the Two Lands, Master of Divine Beasts, the Nine-Tailed One. A tall figure emerged from between the warrior women, her presence immediately commanding attention. Unlike the others, she wore no helmet, allowing cascades of black hair to frame a face whose beauty seemed incidental to its fierce intelligence. Her armor bore elaborate engravings depicting serpents entwined with wind sigils, and the spear she carried was noticeably different, longer. Adorned with feathers and hieroglyphic blessings. The pharaoh sends an envoy? She asked, skepticism evident in her slightly accented speech. How fortunate for the Delta villages that His Divine Majesty finally notices our plight, weeks after the shadows began their feast. Before Sanbi could respond with the righteous indignation of a loyal servant, Menifer stepped forward, pushing back the hood that had concealed his distinctive features. The pharaoh comes himself, priestess, he said simply. The effect was immediate. Most of the warrior women dropped to one knee, pressing their foreheads to the earth in the presence of divine royalty. Their leader, however, merely straightened her posture, dark eyes narrowing as she assessed the young ruler. Interesting, she said after a moment, her voice revealing neither awe nor submission. I am Neith, High Priestess of Wadjet and commander of her sacred guardians. Welcome to the last village in the eastern delta not consumed by shadow. Golden One. The honorific was delivered with a subtle emphasis that bordered on mockery. Though I wonder what brings Egypt's god-king so far from his comfortable palace now. When our messengers have begged for assistance these past 20 days. Tausret bristled visibly at the disrespect, but Menifer silenced her with a subtle gesture. Your messengers never reached the palace, he stated. The shadows are more organized than you realize. Neith's expression shifted minutely, not quite concession, but reassessment. That complicates matters. She turned abruptly, gesturing for them to follow. Come, we have little time for pleasantries. The shadows attack each sunset, and today's will be upon us soon enough. As they passed through the village gates, Menifer observed multiple layers of spiritual defenses, warding symbols painted above doorways, protective amulets hanging from eaves, and copper wire strung between buildings in patterns that creaked. An invisible web of protective energy. The villagers themselves projected the wary resilience of people who had witnessed horror but refused to surrender to it. Your defenses are impressive, men. Nefer observed as Neith led them toward the village center. Few provincial priestesses possess knowledge of the 5th dynasty protection hieroglyphs. Neith cast him a sidelong glance, reassessing once more. I see the God King recognizes ancient script not taught in the royal temple schools. Interesting. She tests you, ***, Apep noted with amusement. Clever priestess. She suspects our nature but seeks confirmation. She suspects something, certainly, Menifer agreed internally. But what does she know of shadow creatures that we don't? Asterisk. They reached a circular clearing at the village's heart, dominated by a modest temple to Wadjet. Unlike the grand sandstone constructions of Thebes, this shrine was built of mud, brick and wood, yet decorated with surprisingly sophisticated artistry, painted scenes depicting the cobra goddess battling shadow entities throughout various epochs of Egyptian history. You've encountered these creatures before, Menifer observed, studying a particularly detailed mural showing shadow beings fleeing from the goddess's fiery breath. Not personally until this moon, Neith replied, directing her warriors to resume their positions with quick hand signals. But Perwajit has stood against the shadow realms since before the dynastic period. Our oral traditions preserve knowledge deliberately omitted from official temple records. The implied criticism of centralized religious authority wasn't lost on Menifer. The Delta regions had always maintained traditions distinct from Upper Egypt, their proximity to foreign lands fostering both innovation and heterodoxy. Knowledge you're willing to share? He inquired, careful to phrase it as a question rather than a royal command. Neith studied him for a long moment, her dark eyes revealing nothing of her thoughts. The shadows serve ancient entities that predate your pantheon, Golden One. Beings neither god nor demon but something other. They harvest human potential, what you would call magic, what we name divine breath, to create a bridge between realms. For what purpose? Tausret asked, professional curiosity temporarily overriding her displeasure with the priestess's attitude. To allow their master's passage. Neith answered grimly. Beings that make your bound fox spirit seem benevolent by comparison. Menifer didn't react visibly to her reference to his divine passenger, but internally. Both he and Apep took sharp notice. She knows, Apep growled. Impossible unless her goddess has told her, Menifer completed the thought. The cobra and the fox have history, it seems. Aloud, he said only, you're well informed for a provincial priestess. Neith's smile held no warmth. And you're unexpectedly straightforward for a pharaoh. Now that we've acknowledged what we both know, perhaps we can dispense with diplomatic circling and address the actual threat. She led them into the temple proper, where a table of polished cedar displayed a detailed map of the Delta region. Small obsidian markers indicated affected villages, creating a distinct pattern that only became apparent when viewed collectively. They're creating a summoning circle, Tausret realized. Tracing the pattern with her finger. Each village corresponds to a power node in the old binding rituals. Precisely, Neith confirmed. 17 villages consumed, 3 remaining, including Perwajit. She pointed to the final positions. When all 20 are harvested, the circle completes, and whatever waits beyond the veil gains entry to our world. Menifer studied the pattern, mind racing through implications. How much time remains? 2 days, perhaps 3. The shadows grow stronger with each successful harvest. Neith's composure slipped slightly, Alling genuine concern beneath her confident exterior. My warriors fight with courage, but we lose ground each night. Without intervention from someone capable of combating spiritual entities on their own terms. She left the conclusion unspoken. She wants our power, Apep observed. But hesitates to ask directly. Pride or prudence? Perhaps both, Menifer responded. Her people face extinction. Even justified suspicion of my nature would be secondary to their survival. You require a god to fight creatures beyond mortality, Menifer stated directly. Yet you clearly harbor reservations about my particular divine connection. Neith didn't flinch from his directness. The cobra and the fox have been adversaries since creation, Golden One. Wadjet fought to imprison the Nin-tailed chaos when it threatened the early kingdoms. Our traditions speak of Apep not as a serpent but as a golden fox whose tails could sweep civilizations into dust. History written by the victors often distorts truth. Menifer countered. 5 years I have carried this divine passenger, and Egypt prospers under our shared guidance. For now, Neith said, her voice neither accusatory nor conciliatory, simply pragmatic. But we face immediate annihilation. Whatever philosophical debates might exist about your arrangement, can wait until my people survive the coming night. Sinbi, who had been unusually silent, finally spoke. What exactly happens during these shadow attacks? Knowing their tactics would help prepare defenses. Grateful for the return to practical matters, Neith gestured toward the temple entrance, where afternoon light was already beginning to wane. They come with the first stars, formless at first, like pools of ink spilled across the night sky. They probe for weaknesses in our wards, testing each symbol and seal. Her voice took on the cadence of someone who had repeated the same horrifying observations too many times. When they find a vulnerability, they pour through like water, taking shape as they manifest, sometimes animal, sometimes human, occasionally both combined in ways that. She paused, collecting herself. Those they touch simply, empty. No wounds, no struggle. One moment a living person, the next a hollow shell. They prefer those with spiritual sensitivity, our priestesses, our magic practitioners, our children with gifts. They take them first, which weakens our defensive capabilities with each attack. And conventional weapons, Sinbi pressed, useless against their incorporeal forms. Once they manifest physically, copper and electrum can harm them. But they learn quickly and rarely maintain solid form when threatened. Mennefer had heard enough. Prepare your strongest warriors, he instructed. We'll reinforce your perimeter wards before sunset and establish a fallback position around the temple. When the shadows come, I'll deal with them directly. Neith raised an eyebrow. Alone, even with your advantages. The shadows numbered over 100 last night. Not alone, Mennefer corrected. Never alone. As sunset approached, the village transformed into a fortress of mystical defenses. Under Tausret's direction, protective hieroglyphics were refreshed with pigments enhanced by her specialized knowledge of divine pharmacology. Sinbi organized the village's limited fighting-capable population into strategic groups, positioning Neith's warrior priestesses where their specialized weapons would be most effective. Mennefer himself worked on the outer perimeter, inscribing sealing formulas that combined traditional Egyptian symbology with patterns unknown to any present save himself and his divine passenger. His fingers moved with inhuman precision, golden energy occasionally visibly flowing into the marks as he worked. Neith observed these preparations with the critical eye of a commander evaluating battlefield strategy. Whatever her reservations about the pharaoh's nature, his ascetical approach revealed both experience and adaptability. Eventually, curiosity overcame caution. Those are not standard sealing hieroglyphs, she observed, approaching Mennefer as he completed a particularly complex formula. No, he agreed without elaboration. Neith crouched beside him, studying the markings. They resemble Wind Kingdom script from the Far Eastern lands. How does Egypt's pharaoh come to know such foreign magic? Mennefer continued working, his brush strokes never hesitating. My mother's bloodline originated beyond the known kingdoms. The knowledge comes with the heritage. And that heritage is why you can contain what you contain, Neith concluded, speaking softly to avoid being overheard by nearby villagers. Yes, yet you're not merely a vessel, are you? Legends of god hosts describe possession, divine puppetry. You remain yourself. Mennefer paused, meeting her gaze directly. Partnership requires mutual respect. Dominance creates weakness, not strength. Neith's expression revealed genuine surprise. Not at the concept itself, but at hearing it from a pharaoh raised in a culture where absolute authority was the foundation of governance. Evolutionary philosophy for one who sits on Egypt's throne. Effective leadership doesn't require tyranny, Mennefer replied, resuming his work. Something Delta communities understand better than the capital, perhaps. This unexpected acknowledgement of regional political differences earned him another reassessment from the priestess. The rumors of your unconventional governance appear understated rather than exaggerated. Interesting. Before their conversation could continue, a village child approached at a run, his expression panicked. Priestess Neith. The western sky. Something comes. They rose simultaneously, turning toward the horizon where the sun's final rays painted the landscape in blood-red hues. Against this crimson backdrop, writhing darkness gathered, not the natural shadows of approaching night, but something that seemed to consume light itself. They come earlier than expected, Neith said, her voice hardening as she shifted to command mode. All defenders to positions. Seal the inner perimeter. As the village erupted into disciplined activity, Mennefer placed a hand on her shoulder, a liberty no one had taken with the priestess in recent memory. Get your people behind the secondary wards. This advance guard tests our preparations. How can you know this? Because it's what I would do, he answered, and for a brief moment, his eyes shifted to molten gold with vertical slits. Tactical assessment transcends species, priestess. Without waiting for her response, Menifer strode toward the western perimeter where the darkness concentrated most densely. As he walked, subtle changes rippled across his form. His posture became more predatory, the whisker marks on his cheeks deepened, and golden energy began to shimmer around him like heat distortion above desert sands. They sense us, Apep observed, his mental voice thrumming with anticipation rather than concern. This is no random attack. They target this village because we are here. Good, Menifer responded with uncharacteristic aggression. Let them focus on us rather than innocence. Asterisk. He reached the western boundary where his newly inscribed sealing formulas formed a protective barrier. Beyond, darkness pooled like living ink, probing the invisible boundary with appendages that resembled both tentacles and clawed hands simultaneously. Without ceremony, Menifer thrust his arms forward, palms outward. Reveal yourselves, he commanded, voice resonating with dual tones as he channeled Apep's energy through his formal pharaonic authority. The darkness recoiled momentarily, then surged forward with renewed purpose, no longer testing but actively attacking. Where it touched Menifer's wards, golden sparks erupted as mystical energies clashed. For several tense moments, the barrier held, intricate seals glowing brightly against the encroaching shadow. Then, with a sound like glass shattering on a cosmic scale, the darkness broke through. It poured into the village like floodwater, splitting into dozens of distinct entities as it crossed the boundary. Some took humanoid form, others resembled jackals or serpents, while the largest manifestations defied categorization entirely, monstrosities of teeth, eyes, and reaching limbs that violated natural geometry. From behind him, Menifer heard the battle cries of Neith's warriors engaging the smaller entities with electrum-tipped spears. Copper flashed in the dying light as specially prepared weapons connected with partially materialized shadows, causing them to recoil with hissing screams. But these skirmishes were mere distractions. The primary shadow mass surged directly toward Menifer, apparently recognizing the greatest threat on the field. Now, partner, Apep asked, ancient bloodlust coloring his mental voice. Now, Menifer agreed, spreading his arms wide as if to embrace the oncoming darkness. Golden energy exploded outward from his form, so bright it momentarily turned night to day. The whisker markings on his face darkened to solid black lines as his eyes shifted fully to Apep's slitted gold. Most dramatically, the energy coalesced behind him in the spectral shape of 9 massive fox tails, each moving independently as if tasting the air for threats. The shadow creatures hesitated, their amorphous forms rippling with what might have been recognition, or fear. You harvest souls for your masters. Menifer Apep spoke, their synchronized voice echoing with divine authority. But you've failed to recognize what hunts you. With speed no mortal could track, he launched Ed himself directly into the largest shadow concentration. Where divine energy met corrupted darkness, reality itself seemed to warp, colors inverted, sound distorted, and the very air crackled with competing magical frequencies. The shadows fought back with unexpected coordination, multiple entities merging to form a massive serpentine shape that lunged at Menifer with fangs formed from compressed darkness. One of his spectral tails intercepted the attack, golden energy sizzling as it connected with shadow matter. From this point of contact, Menifer Apep began actively absorbing the shadow energy rather than merely combating it. The process resembled a predator consuming prey, systematic, efficient, and utterly devastating to the creatures caught in his golden aura. They flee, came Neith's voice from somewhere behind him. Indeed, the smaller shadow manifestations were retreating, pulling back from the village boundaries with unnatural speed. No, Menifer Apep countered, they regroup. The scattered darkness beyond the perimeter was coalescing into something far larger than individual shadow entities, a writhing mass that gradually assumed humanoid form. As details solidified, the creature's nature became apparent. A towering figure with the body of a man but the head of a twisted, corrupted ibis, a mockery of Thoth, god of wisdom and magic. Vessel of Apep, ***, the entity spoke, its voice like stone grinding against metal. Your interference is unexpected but futile. The harvest will complete. The way will open. Menifer stepped forward, golden energy still swirling around him. You address the wrong participant in this conversation, shadow creature. Speak to me directly, puppet master. The corrupted Thoth entity tilted its head at an impossible angle, beak clicking in what might have been amusement. The human vessel presumes much. Very well. I am Sutekh, once counted among your pantheon before my reclassification. While the gods grew fat on worship, I explored deeper realms and found true power. Set, Tausret whispered from behind the protective barrier where she coordinated the village's magical defenses. The god of chaos and storms. Exiled from the pantheon during the Third Dynasty for forbidden rituals. Clever priestess, ***, the entity commented, its attention briefly shifting to Tausret. But in complete knowledge, I was not exiled, I transcended. And soon my new masters will walk this realm, bringing perfect darkness to your flawed creation. Your masters will never cross the boundary, Menifer declared, golden energy intensifying around him. This harvesting stops now. The corrupted god form laughed, a sound like breaking bones amplified 1,000-fold. With what army, fox vessel? Your bound spirit is but one against many. The eastern villages fall tonight. The circle nearly completes. Menifer's expression remained impassive, but internally, alarm spread through his consciousness. If the our villages were under simultaneous attack, the summoning ritual could progress regardless of Perwajit's defense. He speaks truth. Apep confirmed grimly. I sense multiple breaches across the delta. We cannot be in all places at once. The tactical situation clarified instantly. This confrontation was a deliberate distraction, keeping the most powerful defender occupied while the real objective advanced elsewhere. Menifer made his decision in a heartbeat. Neith, he called without taking his eyes off the shadow entity, your warriors can hold this position. I must reach the eastern villages before they fall. Impossible, she objected. The nearest affected village is half a day's journey, even by the fastest boat. For a man, perhaps, Menifer responded, already gathering energy for what came next. The Sutek entity seemed to realize his intention, lunging forward with unexpected speed. You will not interfere, it howled, darkness extending like countless blades. Menifer raised one hand, and a wall of golden energy materialized, temporarily halting the shadow god's advance. With his other hand, he formed a complex gesture unknown to Egyptian magical trad. Ishin, fingers interlocking in patterns that channeled divine energy through specific pathways. Neith, Tausret, Sinbi, protect this village, he instructed, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining the barrier. What comes next may unsettle your people. Before anyone could question his meaning, Menifer's form erupted with blinding golden light. His human outline dissolved as 9 Ssive tails of pure energy unfurled behind him. The transformation continued until a gigantic fox composed entirely of golden chakra stood where the pharaoh had been, each of its 9 tails longer than the village's central temple was tall. Apep unleashed. The Sutek entity hissed, genuine alarm replacing its previous confidence. The seal cannot be broken. The pantheon ensured, ***. The pantheon ensured nothing. Apep responded, his true voice shaking the earth beneath them. My vessel grants me freedom willingly, shadow puppet. A concept beyond your comprehension. With that, the massive fox launched itself eastward, moving with such speed it appeared as a golden comet streaking across the night sky. The shadow entity shrieked in fury, attempting to pursue but finding its elf unable to break through the barrier Menifer had established before his transformation. Left behind, Neith stared at the fading golden trail with an expression that combined awe, terror, and something approaching religious revelation. The pharaoh just transformed into, she struggled to articulate what they had witnessed. Into his true form, Tausret completed, her clinical detachment momentarily abandoned. Or rather, Apep's true form, channeled through a willing vessel. Is he still himself? Neith asked, the question revealing more concern than she likely intended. Sinbi, who had witnessed similar transformations on previous battlefields, nodded grimly. He maintains control, even in that state. But the toll on his human form will be severe afterward. Neith's Adon. Tian returned to the shadow manifestations still threatening the village, smaller and seemingly less coordinated since their master's attention had shifted, but dangerous nonetheless. Then we ensure he has a village to return to, she declared, raising her electrum-tipped spear. Defenders of Wadjet, hold the line until the nine-tailed one returns. Dash dash dash. Golden light streaked across the delta. ND escaped faster than any mortal eye could track. In this form, Apep's pure energy temporarily manifested through their shared bond. Menifer's consciousness rode as passenger rather than pilot, though our partnership ensured neither entity held absolute control. We cannot maintain this form for long, Menifer cautioned as they approached the first eastern village. The human body has limitations, divine passenger or not. Understood, partner, Apep acknowledged. We disrupt the ritual pattern rather than engaging each shadow manifestation. Precision over power. Below them, the refined scene became visible. Shadow creatures swarming through a defenseless village, their victims falling like wheat before scythes. Unlike Perwajet with its trained warriors and spiritual defenses, this settlement had only token protective amulets that failed against the coordinated assault. The nine-tailed fox plunged from the sky into the center of the village, golden light exploding outward on impact. Shadow creatures shrieked as divine energy washed over them, their forms dissolving where Apep's power touched them directly. Flee or be consumed, Apep's voice thundered across the settlement. This node is denied you. Rather than engaging in extended combat, the fox slammed its tails into the earth in a precise pattern, creating a counter-ritual that disrupted the shadows, harvesting magic. Golden energy spread through the ground in glowing lines, forming a protective seal that would prevent the location from being used in the larger summoning circle. Without pausing to confirm their success, Apep Menifer launched skyward again, racing toward the next targeted village. They repeated this process at 3 more settlements, arriving just in time to prevent complete harvesting. Establishing counter seals, then moving on immediately. With each intervention, however, Menifer felt his human form straining under the pressure of channeling so much divine energy. Pain lanced through his consciousness. Warning of approaching limits. We cannot reach them all, he realized as they approached the 5th village, where shadow activity appeared particularly intense. The eastern boundary requires a different approach. Agreed, Apep responded, their shared tactical assessment reaching the same conclusion simultaneously. We target the focal point, the anchor of their ritual pattern. They altered course, bypassing the remaining individual villages to streak toward a particular location indicated on Neith's map, an ancient shrine dating from pre-dynastic times. Situated at the easternmost edge of the delta where river met sea. According to legend, this site had served as a boundary marker between the mortal realm and the divine since creation itself. As they approached, the true nature of the threat became apparent. A massive shadow vortex had formed above the ruined shrine, drawing harvested soul energy from all affected villages into a central pool of darkness. Within this swirling void, something was taking shape, a gateway between realms, nearly complete despite their efforts to disrupt the supporting nodes. Sutek deceived us, Apep growled. The ritual was already near completion. Our disruption merely delayed rather than prevented. Then we target the gateway directly, Menifer decided. All remaining power, concentrated attack. The golden fox gathered its energy, 9 tails converging to focus their power into a single devastating beam aimed at the center of the shadow vortex. Divine chakra collided with corrupted darkness, creating a cataclysmic reaction visible for leagues in all directions. For several heartbeats, the outcome hung in balance, golden light pushing against encroaching shadow, neither yielding. Then, with a sound that transcended normal hearing, the gateway began to fracture, dark energy splintering under Apep's concentrated assault. No, came Sutek's voice, somehow projecting across the distance separating them. The masters come. The way opens. Through the collapsing gateway, something began to emerge, a presence so fundamentally wrong that reality itself seemed to recoil from its touch. Massive limbs composed of darkness deeper than mere absence of light reached through the narrowing aperture, grasping for purchase in the mortal world. All power, now, Apep commanded, no longer concerned with preserving their shared physical form. Menifer concurred, surrendering completely to their unified purpose. The nine-tailed fox's form grew blindingly bright, drawing on energy reserves that would permanently damage their human vessel. With a final tremendous effort, they launched themselves directly into the collapsing gateway, not to pass through, but to physically block whatever sought entry. The resulting collision between divine fox energy and the entity beyond the veil created a paradoxical reaction, like matter meeting antimatter. Where they touched, both began to annihilate, creating a cascading effect that accelerated the gateway's collapse. In the final moment before the portal sealed completely, the entity beyond managed to make contact with Menifer's consciousness. Unlike Sutek's corrupted god form or the shadow creatures, this presence possessed intelligence so alien it defied comprehension. It conveyed not words but pure conceptual meaning. Bypassing linguistic centers entirely. Found you fox vessel marked you will return when barrier thins again. Then the gateway collapsed entirely, the shadow vortex imploding upon itself with a thunderous concussion that flattened the surrounding landscape. Golden light and abyssal darkness annihilated each other in the process, leaving only a smoking crater where the ancient shrine had stood for millennia. Within that crater, a single human form lay unconscious, the golden energy completely drained, the fox spirit momentarily dormant as both entities recovered from near destruction. Consciousness returned to Menifer in fragments. First sensation pain, primarily, then sound, waves lapping against shore, finally sight as he forced his eyes open against crushing fatigue. He found himself lying on soft linen in an unfamiliar structure, a small reed hut near water's edge, judging by the sound and smell of the sea nearby. His body felt hollowed out, as if something essential had been temporarily removed, leaving only the physical shell behind. Most concerning was the silence within his mind. For 5 years, Apep's presence had been his constant companion, sometimes dominant, sometimes receding to background awareness, but always present. Now he sensed nothing of his divine passenger. He sleeps, came a familiar voice from nearby. As you should be doing. Menifer turned his head with painful effort to find Neith seated cross-legged beside his pallet. The priestess looked different, her customary armor replaced by simple linen, her hair unbound rather than secured for battle. Most notably, her expression lacked its usual guardedness, replaced by something approaching concerned respect. How? He managed to croak, his throat painfully dry. How did I find you? She completed his question while offering a clay cup of water. Your fox form was visible across half the delta. When it disappeared, I led my fastest swimmers to your last known position. Her mouth curved in a slight smile. We priestesses of Wadjet are somewhat amphibious by training, if not by nature. Menifer accepted the water gratefully, each swallow sending renewed vitality through his desiccated system. The villages, he asked once he could speak more comfortably. 17 lost before you intervened. 4 saved by your direct action. 3 more spared when the gateway collapsed. Neith's clinical assessment carried the weight of someone accustomed to calculating casualties. Better outcomes than we had any right to expect, given the scale of the threat. Mori of the entity beyond the gateway sent a shudder through Menifer's weakened frame. Not destroyed, he murmured. Merely delayed, so I gathered from the disturbing crater where the eastern shrine once stood. Neith studied him with renewed intensity. Your companion, will he recover? The question surprised Menifer, both in its accuracy regarding Apep's condition and the hint of genuine concern it contained. You speak as if you consider him a separate being rather than a demon possessing me. I've had 3 days to reconsider my assumptions while you recovered, she replied with unexpected candor. Your actions at the gateway, visible to sensitives across the delta as a golden fox battling darkness, contradict everything our traditions taught about Apep as merely a destroyer. 3 days. Menifer attempted to sit up, alarm providing temporary strength. I've been unconscious that long. Neith gently but firmly pressed him back onto the pallet. Your human form was meant to channel so much divine energy at once. The fact that you survived at all defies explanation. Not entirely, came a weak but recognizable voice from within Menifer's mind. Apep's presence, significantly diminished but intact, gradually re-established their connection. Our unique bond allows recovery where separation would mean death for both. Relief flooded through Menifer at T's confirmation that their partnership remained intact, if temporarily weakened. He awakens, he informed Neith. Though diminished, like myself. The priestess nodded as if this confirmed a personal theory. The village healers insisted your condition was beyond their understanding, a divine exhaustion rather than mortal illness. They wanted to perform traditional exorcism rites. Her slight smile returned. I may have suggested such attempts would result in unfortunate consequences for the practitioners. Thank you, Menifer said with genuine gratitude. Separation would indeed have consequences. A comfortable silence fell between them, surprising given their initial antagonism. Eventually, Neith spoke again, her tone more personal than he had yet heard from her. You could have remained in Perwajit, she observed. Defended one village successfully rather than risking yourself for settlements you've never seen, populated by people who don't even know your name. That would have been tactically unsound. Menifer replied automatically. Tactically, perhaps, but I've seen enough royal politics to recognize when practicality aligns with personal inclination. Neith leaned forward slightly. You genuinely consider all Egypt's people your responsibility, not merely as subjects, but as individuals worthy of protection. Menifer didn't immediately respond, somewhat uncomfortable with such direct personal assessment. Finally, he said, a shepherd doesn't protect only favorite sheep. Neith laughed, a surprisingly melodious sound from someone whose voice he had previously heard only in commands or criticisms. Now you sound like our village elders. The Delta has always favored such direct metaphors over court poetry. Another silence, but with the tension between them fundamentally altered. Neith eventually stood, moving toward the hut's entrance. Your royal guards and the high priestess Tausret should arrive by midday. They've been anxious about your condition. You've spoken with them. Quote, message birds, she explained. Practical communication being another Delta specialty the capital might consider adopting. As she pushed aside the reed curtain, sunlight silhouetted her figure, highlighting the strength in her posture and the grace in her movement that battle armor had partially concealed. Neith, Menifer called, causing her to pause in the doorway. Thank you for finding me, for protecting me while vulnerable. She turned partly back toward him, her expression thoughtful. The cobra and the fox have been enemies since creation began, she said, referencing their earlier conversation. But perhaps that enmity was based on misunderstanding rather than incompatibility. Her gaze met his directly. Rest well, nine-tailed one. We have much to discuss when you're stronger. After she departed, Apep's presence stirred more actively in Menifer's mind. An interesting priestess, the fox spirit observed. Her spiritual energy resonates with Wadjet's true essence rather than merely carrying symbolic connection. Rare in this age. You sound almost approving, Menifer noted with surprise. The Cobra goddess and I have a complicated history, Apep admitted. But Neith sees with unclouded eyes. She recognized our partnership for what it is, not what tradition claims it must be. Such perception is valuable and uncommon. Before Menifer could pursue this intriguing comment, exhaustion reclaimed him, pulling him back into healing sleep. His last conscious thought acknowledged a surprising truth. For the first time since becoming Pharaoh, he had encountered someone who saw him as neither god nor king, but simply as himself, and judged him worthy nonetheless. 1 week later, Menifer stood at the prow of the royal barge as it prepared to depart Perwajit, returning at last to the capital. His strength had largely returned, though Apep's energy remained somewhat diminished, a condition the fox spirit assured him would improve with time. The village had transformed during his recovery. What began as a desperate last stand against shadow creatures had evolved into a celebration of survival and renewal. Delegations from neighboring settlements had arrived daily, bringing offerings to both the Cobra goddess and, more unusually, to the Nine-Tailed Guardian, a title that had apparently spread through the Delta region with remarkable speed. Your legend grows, observed Tausret, joining him at the railing. The high priestess had maintained a careful watch over his recovery, her medical expertise complementing the village healer's more traditional methods. The court will find it difficult to maintain the fiction that you are merely a divinely favored pharaoh rather than something more unique. Let them struggle with definitions, Menifer replied, his attention focused on the temple courtyard where Neith was conducting a purification ritual for survivors from the eastern villages. Labels matter less than actions. Tausret followed his gaze, her expression unreadable. The priestess has requested permission to establish formal communication between her temple and the royal court. A direct channel bypassing traditional hierarchies. Grant it, Menifer said without hesitation. And allocate resources for rebuilding the affected villages. Not as royal charity, but as partnership between regions. Partnership, Tausret repeated, a hint of amusement coloring her voice. A concept you seem increasingly fond of. Before he could respond to this observation, a familiar figure approached the barge, Neith. Having concluded her ritual duties, she had resumed her warrior priestess attire, but subtle changes marked her appearance, a golden amulet shaped like a fox now cown. Turbalanced the traditional cobra emblem at her throat, and her ceremonial spear bore newly added hieroglyphics that combined protection symbols from both Upper and Lower Egyptian traditions. The haired court officials and guards straightened reflexively as she approached, her natural authority drawing respect despite her provincial status. She stopped at the boarding plank, making no move to enter the royal vessel without explicit invitation. Pharaoh Menifer, she addressed him formally, though a hint of their newly established familiarity remained in her tone. Perwajit thanks you for your protection and assistance. The Cobra goddess acknowledges the debt owed to the nine-tailed guardian. Protocol dictated a similarly formal response, but Menifer had never been overly concerned with court etiquette. He descended from the barge to stand before her, closing the physical distance that hierarchical tradition would have maintained. No debt exists between allies, Priestess Neith, he replied. Perwajit's knowledge of the Shadow Realm proved as valuable as any contribution I made to its defense. Her dark eyes studied him with the same direct assessment he had come to appreciate, no artifice. No courtly dissembling, only honest evaluation. Nevertheless, bonds have formed that did not exist before. She reached into a pouch at her belt, withdrawing a small object wrapped in linen. A token of those bonds. If you will accept it. Menifer extended his hand, and she placed the wrapped item in his palm. Unwrapping it carefully, he revealed an amulet of unusual design. A small electrum disc inscribed with hieroglyphics so ancient they predated standardized forms, surrounding a central motif that cleverly combined the cobra and fox symbols into a unified emblem. This is, he began, recognizing the symbolic significance immediately. A recognition of new understanding, Neith completed. Created according to the oldest traditions of our temple, methods not Shah. Read outside our priestesshood for 20 dynasties. The amulet practically hummed with protective energy, its craftsmanship far exceeding typical talismans. More significant was its symbolic meaning, an acknowledgement that traditional enemies could become allies when old prejudices were set aside. I accept with gratitude, Menifer said, placing the amulet around his neck where it settled alongside his royal insignia. And offer something in return. He removed one of his ceremonial armbands, gold set with lapis lazuli, inscribed with his personal cartouche. Such items were typically given only to family members or highest-ranking officials, making the gesture highly irregular by court standards. This signifies direct access to the pharaoh, he explained, presenting it to her. Not me. Rely to court officials or temple intermediaries, but to me personally. When matters of shadow and light require consultation, use this to ensure your words reach my ears directly. Neith accepted the armband with appropriate formality, though surprise briefly flickered across her features. An unexpected honor, golden one. The Delta has not received such recognition from the throne in living memory. Past oversight, not deliberate exclusion, Menifer replied. Something I intend to remedy moving forward. Their exchange had drawn considerable attention from the assembled court officials, generating whispers that would undoubtedly transform into elaborate speculation by the time they reached the capital. Tausret observed from the barge with an expression that combined resignation and amusement, another political complication to manage in their return to court. As if sensing her thoughts, Menifer smiled slightly. My high priestess fears I create unnecessary diplomatic entanglements. Your high priestess understands the value of regional allies better than most court officials, Neith countered with a matching smile. Though perhaps she worries about the particular form this alliance takes. And what form would that be, priestess? Menifer asked, curiosity genuine rather than merely polite. Neith glanced at the assembled observers, then back to him with subtle mischief in her eyes. One unprecedented in the relations between Upper and Lower Egypt. The cobra and the fox, traditionally adversaries, finding common purpose through mutual respect rather than dominance. She adjusted the golden armband on her wrist. Some might consider such an arrangement revolutionary. Revolution implies destruction of existing structures, Menifer observed. I prefer evolution, adaptation that strengthens rather than replaces. Semantics, Golden One, Neith replied with a hint of her former sharpness. The outcome remains the same, change that certain powerful interests will resist. Let them resist, Menifer said with quiet confidence. The shadows we faced here are merely harbingers. When the greater darkness comes, Egypt will need unified strength, not regional divisions. Neith's expression sobered at this reminder of the entity they had glimpsed beyond the gateway. You believe it will return. I know it will. He touched the amulet she had given him. Which is why connections like this matter more than court politics or traditional separations. The boarding call sounded from the royal barge, final preparations for departure completed. Menifer recognized he had already extended this farewell beyond what protocol deemed appropriate, but found himself reluctant to conclude their conversation. Until we meet again, priestess of Wadjet, he said finally, inclining his head in a gesture of respect rarely offered by pharaohs to provincial officials. Until that day, nine-tailed guardian, she responded, matching his gesture precisely, neither subservient nor presumptuous, but exactly equal in respect offered and received. As Menifer returned to the barge and it pulled away from shore, a pep stirred within his consciousness. The priestess would make a valuable ally in conflicts to come, the fox spirit observed. Her connection to Wadjet provides capabilities complementary to our own. Just an ally? Menifer questioned, watching Neith's figure grow smaller as distance increased between them. What else would you suggest, partner? Apep replied with something approaching amusement. Though I note your heart rate increases notably in her presence. An observation, not a suggestion, Menifer countered, turning his attention back to the journey ahead. Yet he found his thoughts returning to their conversations during his recovery, discussions that had ranged from practical defensive strategies to philosophical debates about the nature of divinity and leadership. In 5 years as pharaoh, he had never encountered Somio, who challenged his thinking so directly while simultaneously respecting both his authority and his nature. The experience was refreshing in ways he hadn't anticipated. The cobra and the fox, he murmured to himself, finding common purpose. Behind him, Tausret sighed audibly. Court politics were already complicated enough with a nine-tailed pharaoh. Adding a warrior priestess from the delta to the equation, she left the observation unfinished. Evolution rather than revolution, High Priestess, Menifer reminded her, a slight smile playing across his features as the royal barge continued its journey southward, carrying Egypt's most unusual pharaoh back toward the capital, and whatever shadows awaited them there. In the smoldering crater where the eastern boundary shrine had stood, moonlight illuminated a single figure carefully examining the scorched earth. Sutek, or rather, the mortal vessel through which the corrupted god partially manifested, traced patterns in the ash with practiced precision. Fascinating, the figure murmured, voice carrying the dual tones of divine possession. The fox vessel not only disrupted the summoning but created a counter-seal in the process. Fingers blackened with ash lifted a small sample to waiting lips, tasting the residual energy. Yet the boundary remains fundamentally weakened. Rising to full height, the possessed form gazed eastward across the sea, toward lands beyond Egypt's knowledge. The master's message reached him despite the gateway's collapse. The connection is established, however tenuously. From within the mortal vessel's robes, the figure withdrew a small obsidian disc inscribed with symbols that hurt the eye to observe directly, neither hieroglyphics nor any human writing system, but something older and inherently wrong. One failed ritual matters little in the greater design, the Sutek vessel declared to the empty night. The nine-tailed one has revealed himself fully. His alliances form predictably, the cobra goddess, so righteous in her protection. The mortal priestess, so impressed by nobility and sacrifice. The obsidian disc began to pulse with negative light, not illumination but rather the active absence of it, consuming nearby moonlight like a miniature void. Let him gather his strength and his allies, Sutek continued, placing the disc at the precise center of the crater. When the true convergence comes, all preparations will prove insufficient. The masters have marked him now, fox and vessel both. What was briefly glimpsed cannot be unseen. The disk sank into the scorched earth as if being absorbed, disappearing completely beneath the surface. Where it vanished, the ground briefly rippled like disturbed water before settling back to solid form. The seed is planted, the figure declared with grim satisfaction. Now we wait for it to grow. With that pronouncement, the possessed form turned away from the crater and began walking inland, pace unhurried, expression serene. Appearing to any casual observer as merely a traveler navigating by moonlight. Only the unnatural shadows that pooled around each footprint suggested something far more sinister than human journeyed across Egypt's ancient sands. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Vessels of the Gods. The fluorescent lights of the Cairo Museum's conservation lab cast harsh shadows across the fragments of alabaster and gold spread before Ishizu Ishtar. 3 days had passed since her strange encounter with the entity calling itself Karama, and sleep had become a luxury she could ill afford. Every moment not spent at the excavation site was dedicated to piecing together the puzzle of the nine-tailed pharaoh, a historical figure absent from conventional records yet potentially crucial to understanding the supernatural events unfolding across Egypt. "You look terrible," observed her brother Merrick, placing a paper cup of strong Turkish coffee beside her workstation. Unlike Ishizu's disheveled appearance, Merrick maintained his customary precision, clothes immaculate despite the dusty environment, platinum hair perfectly styled. "When did you last sleep?" "Define sleep," Ishizu replied without looking up from the fragment she was examining under a digital microscope. "If you mean proper unconsciousness rather than brief naps between revelations, then approximately 72 hours ago. That's not sustainable. Neither is the potential collapse of the barrier between our world and whatever lies beyond it." She gestured toward the images displayed on nearby monitors, satellite photos, showing unusual energy signatures at archaeological sites across Egypt. "The phenomenon is accelerating, Merrick. Golden energy manifestations have been reported at 7 additional locations since yesterday." Merrick studied the data with a frown. "The pattern seems almost systematic, as if something is searching." "Someone, not something," Ishizu corrected. She finally looked up, dark circles prominent beneath her eyes. "The entity I encountered, whether it's really the ancient Apep or some other powerful being, is hunting for a suitable vessel. A human host with specific genetic markers. And you believe this, fox spirit, is telling the truth about protecting humanity rather than threatening it." Ishizu's hand unconsciously touched the Millennium necklace concealed beneath her collar. The necklace doesn't detect deception in its communication. But more convincingly, she pulled up security footage on her tablet and handed it to Merrick. The video showed the Cairo Museum's exterior from the previous night. As promised by the entity, shadow creatures materialized from darkness itself, seeping through walls and crawling across the ground toward the ancient Egyptian galleries. As they reached the main entrance, a burst of golden energy erupted from seemingly nowhere, forcing the shadows back. The confrontation lasted only moments before both the shadows and the golden light vanished, leaving no physical evidence of the encounter. "This happened while I was inside cataloging the new artifacts," Ishizu explained. "I felt the energy discharge but saw nothing directly." Saku Ricci reported a momentary power fluctuation but found no intruders. Merrick returned the tablet, his skepticism visibly wavering. "So this Karama protected the museum. Why?" "Because several key facts from our excavation are stored here, pieces potentially useful for tracking the original nine-tailed pharaoh's bloodline." Ishizu gestured toward the fragments before her. "These contain trace DNA that might help identify potential modern vessels." "You're actually considering helping this entity find a human host," Merrick stated, his tone somewhere between accusation and disbelief. "I'm considering all options to prevent whatever broke through 3,000 years ago from completing the job now." Ishizu rubbed her temples, the constant headache of exhaustion pulsing behind her eyes. "The shadow incursions are increasing. Merrick, if this fox spirit truly opposed them during the dynastic period, that's a significant sister. Then we may need similar intervention now," she finished, ignoring his interruption. Their discussion halted as the lab door opened, admitting Drive Amara Sayegh from the Department of Ancient Linguistics. Brilliant and outspoken, the Lebanese EGY Tian cryptologist had been recruited specifically for her expertise in obscure hieratic scripts and predynastic written forms. Please tell me you've brought something useful, Ishizu said by way of greeting. Amara raised an eyebrow, her perpetually skeptical expression taking in Ishizu's disheveled state. Useful and potentially revolutionary, though you might want to consider whether sleep deprivation is the optimal condition for processing paradigm-shifting historical revelations. Despite her exhaustion, Ishizu smiled slightly. Amara's acerbic personality and refusal to soften her brilliance for the comfort of colleagues had made her something of an outcast in academic circles, but also the perfect person for deciphering texts others might dismiss as mythological nonsense. What have you found? Merrick asked, gesturing toward the leather document case Amara carried. The cryptologist placed the case on a clear section of workbench and removed a collection of high-resolution photographs, laying them out in sequence. These are from the Edfu Temple archives, texts that were deliberately separated from public collections during the Middle Kingdom. They reference a period called the Sealing of the Nine Aspects and describe a pharaoh with distinctive facial markings who commanded the Egyptian gods rather than serving them. Ishizu leaned forward, instantly focused despite her fatigue. Menifer, she whispered, recognizing the cartouche that appeared repeatedly throughout the texts. Yes, the same name from your excavation, Amara confirmed. But here's where it gets interesting. She pointed to a specific hieroglyphic sequence. This doesn't describe him as merely channeling divine power like traditional pharaohs. It explicitly states he contained a being called Apep, not as a serpent but as a nine-tailed fox spirit, through a voluntary partnership rather than magical imprisonment. Partnership, Merrick repeated skeptically. The exact hieroglyph is Jarut, a term typically used for diplomatic alliances between equals rather than master-servant relationships. Amara's dark eyes gleamed with intellectual excitement. This fundamentally contradicts Estable, Egyptological understanding of divine-mortal interactions during the early dynasties. What happened to him? Ishizu asked, her finger hovering above an image showing the distinctive pharaoh confronting shadowy figures. Amara rearranged the photographs, revealing a sequence depicting what appeared to be a massive battle. According to these texts, Menifer fought entities called the Devo, Urers of light, that emerged from a tear between worlds. When conventional methods failed, he and his divine passenger performed a ritual that sealed both the invaders and themselves into separate cells, 9 alabaster fox statues placed at cardinal points throughout Egypt. The statues we found in the hidden chamber, Ishizu realized. Exactly. But here's the truly revolutionary aspect. Amar pointed to the final text in the sequence. This isn't just historical documentation, it's prophetic. It states, when the stars align as they did in the first time, and metal birds cross the sky, the nine-tailed one shall awaken. The vessels shall call to one another across the great river of time, and the final battle for Ma'at shall commence anew. Silence fell across the laboratory as the implications settled over them. Merrick broke it first, his voice carefully controlled. You're suggesting these texts predicted modern aircraft and the current energy manifestations we're witnessing? I'm not suggesting anything, Amara replied with characteristic bluntness. I'm translating what the texts actually say. Your interpretation is your own business. She gathered her materials with practiced efficiency. There's more to decipher, but I thought you should see this immediately, given the unusual events occurring around your excavation. As she prepared to leave, Ishizu placed a hand on her arm. We need your help with this, Drive. Sayig, not just with translation but interpretation. You have a perspective uncontaminated by, she hesitated, by certain preconceptions about what's possible. Amara's expression shifted subtly, professional detachment briefly giving way to genuine curiosity. Are you suggesting these ancient phenomena are somehow manifesting in the present day? That's quite a leap from scholarly analysis too. The lights in the laboratory suddenly flickered, cutting her off mid-sentence. The temperature dropped noticeably, condensation forming instantly on metal surfaces. On Ishizu's workstation, the alabaster fragments began to emit a faint golden glow. What in the name of, Amara started, backing away instinctively. Don't move, Merrick warned. Reaching slowly for the ceremonial dagger he always carried, a family heirloom with protective properties beyond its physical construction. The glow intensified, coalescing above the fragments too. form indistinct shapes that resembled written characters, not hieroglyphics but something more fluid, more primal. They shifted continuously, rearranging themselves into new configurations before dissolving and reforming. It's responding to the texts, Ishizu realized, watching the patterns correlate with the documents Amara had brought. It's translating something. Against all rational instinct, Amara stepped closer. Her scientific curiosity overwhelming caution. These aren't standard hieroglyphics or even hieratic forms. They're prototypical, like linguistic DNA that predates formalized writing systems. The golden symbols suddenly stabilized into a single, coherent message that hovered in the air before them. Though the script was unlike anything they had seen before, all three found they could understand its meaning directly, as if it bypassed visual processing to communicate directly with their minds. The vessel awakens. The shadows gather. Find him before they do. As suddenly as it had appeared, the golden energy dissipated, leaving the laboratory in normal lighting once more. The alabaster fragments looked ordinary again, showing no evidence of their brief supernatural display. Amara stood frozen, her face pale but her eyes alight with the particular intensity that scholars display when confronted with irrefutable evidence that challenges their fundamental assumptions. "Well," she said after a long moment, her voice remarkably steady, "I believe that conclusively addresses my concerns about the practical applications of these translations." Merrick cool. Didn't suppress a short laugh despite the tension. "Welcome to the Ishtar family's version of archaeological research, Drive. Sayig." Ishizu was already checking her phone, scrolling through notifications that had accumulated during their discussion. 3 more energy manifestations reported in the past hour, she informed them grimly. All centered around individuals who experienced sudden collapse followed by unexplained recovery. The pattern is accelerating. It's searching for compatible hosts, Merrick surmised. And apparently finding candidates, Ishizu agreed. She turned to Amara, whose professional composure had already reasserted itself despite the supernatural display they had just witnessed. "Dr. Sayig, I believe your expertise has become essential to national security, though not in any way the Antiquities Ministry would officially recognize. Are you willing to work with us on understanding these phenomena, even if it means venturing beyond conventional academic methodology?" Amara gathered her documents with deliberate care, her expression unreadable for several seconds. Finally, she looked up, dark eyes reflecting the combination of scientific rigor and intuitive brilliance that had made her both respected and isolated within her field. "Dr. Ishtar, I've spent my career being ridiculed for suggesting that ancient Egyptian texts should be taken literally rather than metaphorically when they discuss interaction with divine entities." She closed her document case with a decisive snap. "The opportunity to prove my interpretations correct, regardless of how you orthodox the methodology, is not one I'm inclined to reject. I'm in." Ishizu nodded, relief evident beneath her professional demeanor. "Then we need to locate the vessel mentioned in the message. The modern descendant of Pharaoh Menefer, someone whose genetic structure would be compatible with hosting a divine entity. And how exactly does one track a 3,000-year-old bloodline?" Merrick asked skeptically. Before Ishizu could respond, her phone chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at the screen, her expression shifting to one of surprise. "Perhaps more directly than we thought," she said, showing them the notification, a security alert from the museum's main gallery where the artifacts from their excavation were displayed. The message contained a single line: "Individual collapsed in Egyptian Gallery 5. Exhibiting unusual physical manifestations. Medical assistance requested." Gallery 5, Merrick noted, where the alabaster fox statues are displayed. Ishizu was already moving toward the door, newfound energy overriding her exhaustion. "I believe our vessel may have found us rather than the other way around." Yusuf Nazari had no intention of collapsing in the Cairo Museum when he woke that morning. The 26-year-old archaeology graduate student had visited the new exhibit hoping to gather research for his dissertation on early dynastic religious practice. CES, a conventional academic pursuit that had nothing to do with the strange dreams plaguing him for weeks. Yet standing before the display case containing the recently discovered alabaster fox statues, something had shifted fundamentally in his perception. The ambient sounds of the museum, shuffling feet, hushed conversations, the subtle hum of climate control systems, had faded to distant echoes. The statues themselves seemed to emit a subtle glow visible only to him, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Then the visions had begun, flashes of memories that couldn't possibly be his own. Golden light streaming through alabaster windows. The weight of ceremonial regalia against sun-bronzed skin. A massive fox composed of pure energy, its 9 tails sweeping across a star-filled sky. The lost thing Yusuf remembered was reaching toward the display case, his reflection in the glass showing something impossible, 3 whisker-like markings manifesting on each cheek, golden energy shimmering beneath his skin. Then darkness had claimed him. Consciousness returned gradually, awareness filtering through layers of disorientation. He was lying on something reasonably comfortable, a couch or daybed rather than the museum floor. Voices murmured nearby, their tones suggesting urgency beneath professional restraint. Genetic markers match the samples from the pharaonic remains, a woman was saying. The mitochondrial lineage is consistent with Eastern migration patterns during the Second Dynasty, exactly as the texts described. That's statistically improbable to the point of impossibility, responded another female voice, this one more clipped and analytical. The bloodline would have been diluted beyond recognition over 3,000 years. Unless it was deliberately maintained, countered a male voice. Remember the tomb keeper traditions. Certain Egyptian families preserved specific genetic lines through selective marriage practices for millennia. He's regaining consciousness, the first woman observed. Moving closer, Yusuf opened his eyes to find himself in what appeared to be a private office within the museum, attended by 3 people he didn't recognize. He woman nearest to him had striking features, intelligent dark eyes, black hair pulled back in a simple style, and the subtle confidence of someone accustomed to authority. She wore the identification badge of a senior museum curator. Mr. Nazari, she addressed him directly. I'm Ishizu Ishtar, Director of Special Collections. How are you feeling? Yusuf attempted to sit up, finding his limbs unusually heavy. Confused, he admitted. Did I faint? That's never happened before. Your reaction to the artifacts was somewhat more significant than simple vasovagal syncope, said the second woman, younger than Ishizu. With a sharper demeanor and scholarly intensity radiating from her posture. You exhibited specific physiological changes when in proximity to the alabaster statues. Amara, Ishizu cautioned, perhaps we could allow Mr. Nazari a moment to orient himself before discussing the anomalies. Anomalies, Yusuf repeated, suddenly more alert. His hand moved instinctively to his face, fingers tracing his cheeks where he had seen the strange markings in his reflection. The skin felt normal now, though oddly warm to the touch. What happened to me? The 3 exchanged glances that contained volumes of unspoken communication. Finally, Ishizu sat beside him, her expression both compassionate and evaluative. Mr. Nazari, have you been experiencing any unusual phenomena recently? Dreams, perhaps, or sensations that seem disconnected from your normal experience? The question struck uncomfortably close to his private concerns. For weeks, his sleep had been disrupted by vivid dreams of ancient Egypt, not the romanticized version from films but a viscerally real environment he navigated with the familiarity of home. More disturbing were the occasional waking episodes where his senses seemed to expand beyond normal human capability, allowing him to perceive sounds, scents, and energies that should have been imperceptible. Why would you ask that? He countered, professional training asserting itself despite his disorientation. As a scientist, however junior, he knew better than to confirm biased hypotheses through leading questions. Because your genetic profile suggests you might be experiencing something beyond conventional medical explanation, Ishizu replied with surprising directness. Something connected to the artifacts you were examining when you collapsed. My genetic profile, Yusuf repeated, alarm rising. You took my DNA while I was unconscious. That's highly unethical and almost certainly illegal. The third person, a man with king platinum hair and a more reserved demeanor than the women, stepped forward. A simple cheek swab for comparison against archaeological samples, nothing invasive. I'm Merrick Ishtar, head of security for this department. Your collapse triggered specific security protocols for incidents involving the new exhibition. That doesn't justify genetic sampling without consent, Yusuf insisted, pushing. G himself fully upright despite lingering dizziness. I should report this to the University Ethics Board and possibly the authorities. You absolutely should, the woman called Amara agreed unexpectedly. It was my exact response when the Ishtars first involved me in their unorthodox research methodologies. However, before you contact the relevant oversight committees, you might want to explain these. She handed him a tablet displaying security footage of his collapse in the gallery. The video clearly showed the manifestation Yusuf had glimpsed in his reflection, distinctive whisker-like markings appearing on his cheeks, accompanied by a golden aura that the camera had somehow captured despite its subjective nature. This is, he began, then faltered, scientific training warring wit. Direct evidence of something beyond conventional explanation. Consistent with descriptions of the nine-tailed pharaoh's appearance when channeling divine energy, Ishizu completed gently. Mr. Nazari, we believe you may be experiencing a connection to an ancient Egyptian ruler named Menefer, a pharaoh deliberately removed from official historical records because of his unique relationship with a powerful entity known as a Pep. Under normal circumstances, Yusuf would have dismissed such a claim as pseudoscientific nonsense. His academic work was grounded in material evidence and peer-reviewed research, not mystical connections to ancient rulers. Yet the dreams that had haunted him, the inexplicable sensory experiences, and now the physical manifestations captured on video formed a pattern too coherent to casually dismiss. The name, he said quietly, Menefer. I've heard it before. All three tensed subtly at this admission. Where? Amara asked, her professional skepticism momentarily overshadowed by scholarly interest. In my dreams, Yusuf admitted reluctantly. For weeks now, I've been dreaming of ancient Egypt. Not tourist brochure Egypt, but something more immediate. More real. He hesitated, then continued with academic precision. The architecture includes elements missing from conventional archaeological reconstructions, specific roofing techniques, interior layouts of temple complexes, hierarchical spatial arrangements that align with emerging theories but haven't been confirmed through excavation. You're an archaeologist, Merrick observed. Couldn't essay details simply reflect your professional knowledge manifesting in dreams? I specialize in religious practices, not architectural reconstruction, Yusuf countered. And some elements contradict current scholarly consensus while aligning with recent findings not yet published. I've been documenting the discrepancies, actually, planning to follow up with focused research to determine whether my subconscious was making creative connections or merely generating randomized dream content. Ishizu and Amara exchanged meaningful glances. Systematic documentation of presumably supernatural experiences. Amara noted with apparent approval. I appreciate the methodological rigor, Mr. Nazari. Yusuf, please, he replied automatically, scholar to scholar. And you would be, Dr. Amara Sayegh, Department of Ancient Linguistics. Specialized in predynastic written forms and hieratic variations. Her introduction was precise and professional, but contained an undercurrent of excitement RLY concealed beneath academic detachment. Your dreams, did they include any textual elements? Written forms you could reproduce? The question struck Yusuf as oddly specific yet perfectly aligned with his own unvoiced concerns. Yes, actually. Scripts I don't recognize from my studies but can somehow read in the dream state. When I try to document them after waking, the symbols seem to resist transcription. My hand won't form them correctly. Fascinating, Amara breathed, academic caution momentarily abandoned. The texts described this knowledge that passes directly through bloodline connection rather than conventional learning. The vessel remembers what the original knew, but only when the connection activates. Vessel, Yusuf repeated, discomfort returning. That's a rather dehumanizing term. My apologies, Ishizu interjected smoothly. Dr. Sayegh is referring to historical terminology, not making a value judgment about your personhood. She leaned forward, her expression intensifying. Yusuf, I understand this must seem overwhelming and possibly disturbing. Your rational mind is likely generating multiple explanations for these experiences: stress, overwork, perhaps even concerns about neurological issues. Quote, the thought had occurred to me, he admitted. My doctoral advisor suggested I might be experiencing burnout-induced hallucinations. A reasonable hypothesis given limited information. Ishizu acknowledged. but insufficient to explain the physical manifestations we observed, or the statistically impossible genetic markers you carry that exactly match. DNA extracted from Pharaonic era remains specifically connected to Mennefer. Yusuf's training in scientific methodology warred with his direct experience. The rational explanation, stress-induced hallucinations combined with a coincidental genetic similarity to ancient remains, seemed increasingly inadequate to explain what was happening. Yet the alternative, that he somehow carried the consciousness or connection to a 3,000-year-old pharaoh, violated everything he understood about reality. Let's say, hypothetically, that I accept there's something unusual happening here beyond conventional explanation, he said carefully. What exactly are you suggesting is occurring? And more importantly, why are you researching it? You're archaeologists and linguists, not parapsychologists. He exchanged another communicative glance before Merrick spoke. Show him the energy signature maps, he suggested to his sister. Concrete data might be more persuasive than theoretical frameworks at this stage. Ishizu nodded and retrieved a tablet, pulling up satellite imagery overlaid with colorful heat map patterns. These show unusual energy manifestations across Egypt over the past 2 weeks, she explained. Handing him the device, each red point indicates an incident similar to what happened in our gallery, brief but intense energy discharges that our instruments register but conventional technology mostly misses. Yusuf studied the data with growing unease. The pattern was clearly non-random. Concentrations around ancient sites with tendrils extending outward in mathematically predictable progressions. This looks almost like a search pattern, Ishizu confirmed. Something is systematically investigating locations connected to ancient power nodes throughout Egypt. And as of this morning, similar manifestations have been recorded in Japan, China, and parts of Central Asia, all regions with historical fox spirit mythologies. You believe these energy signatures are connected to my episodes. We believe they represent a being searching for suitable vessels, individuals with specific genetic markers that would allow them to channel divine energy without being destroyed by it. Ishizu's voice remained calm despite the extraordinary nature of her statement. According to texts we've recently translated, this entity requires a human host to operate effectively in our world, particularly to combat other entities that are simultaneously attempting to break through weakened barriers between dimensions. Under normal circumstances, Yusuf would have excused himself from what was clearly a descent into pseudoscientific fantasy. Yet the evidence before him, the satellite data, his own experiences, the security footage showing his physical transformation, formed a coherent pattern that demanded consideration. What does this have to do with the alabaster fox statues? He asked, focusing on tangible archaeological elements rather than metaphysical claims. They're containers, Amara explained, professional excitement overriding her usual skepticism. According to the Edfu texts, Pharaoh Mennefer and his divine passenger, the nine-tailed entity Kai Diapep, faced an incursion from beings beyond conventional reality. When traditional methods failed to repel them, they performed a ritual that sealed both the invaders and themselves into separate cells, 9 alabaster fox statues placed at cardinal points throughout Egypt. The statues were never meant to be reunited, Merrick continued. Each contained a fraction of the original entity's power, deliberately separated to prevent either complete destruction or uncontrolled release. Yet someone collected them and placed them in that hidden chamber where we found them, Ishizu added. Sometime during the late period. Judging by the architectural elements, long after Mennefer's reign. They remained sealed there until our excavation inadvertently disrupted the containment. Yusuf processed this information with the methodical thoroughness that had made him a promising young scholar despite his unorthodox research interests. You're suggesting that by uncovering these statues, you said some ancient entity that's now searching for a suitable host, and that I, through some genetic coincidence, am compatible with this being. Not coincidence, Amara corrected. Deliberate preservation of a bloodline. Your mitochondrial DNA contains markers specifically mentioned in the texts. Those who bear the Eastern spiral within their life thread shall carry the burden when darkness returns. Before Yusuf could respond, a sharp pain lanced through his head, so sudden and intense that he gasped, doubling over. Behind his closed eyelids, golden light flared, and with it came a voice. He seemed to bypass his ears to speak directly to his mind. Danger approaches. The shadows have found you. What's happening? Ishizu's concerned voice seemed distant through the pain. Yusuf 4. CED. His eyes opened to find the three scholars watching him with varying expressions of concern. Something's coming, he managed to say through gritted teeth. Something dangerous, as if confirming his warning. The lights in the office flickered, then failed completely, plunging them into darkness relieved only by emergency lighting that cast everything in an eerie red glow. Security breach in the East Wing, Merrick reported. Checking his phone. Multiple unidentified intruders. The fox statues, Ishizu realized immediately. They're targeting the artifacts. Or they're targeting him, Amara suggested. Nodding toward Yusuf. If he's truly manifesting connection to this entity, he'd register on whatever detection methods they're using. Merrick moved to the office door, checking the hallway before securing it. We need to relocate immediately. The secure levels beneath the conservation lab should provide temporary protection. Yusuf pushed himself upright, the pain receding IGHTLY though golden energy continued to pulse behind his vision. Who are they? What's happening? The short, incredibly oversimplified version. Amara replied while gathering essential research materials with practiced efficiency. The same entities that tried to break through 3,000 years ago are attempting again. Based on energy signatures and witness reports, they can manifest temporarily through human hosts, willing or otherwise. They've been monitoring our research since the excavation began. We call them the Akatsuki Council in our internal communications, Ishizu added. Retrieving a secure case from a hidden compartment in her desk. It means, dawn, in Japanese, an ironic reference to their goal of bringing a new age by unleashing ancient powers. That's Yusuf struggled to find appropriate words for such an outlandish scenario. Completely insane, Amara suggested helpfully. Paradigm shattering, a fundamental revision of established historical and scientific understanding. Yes to all three. Welcome to what my academic life has been like for the past decade, except now with tangible evidence rather than merely theoretical frameworks. Despite the gravity of the situation, Yusuf found himself appreciating her sardonic perspective. Before he could respond, another wave of pain crashed through him, sharper than before, accompanied by fragmentary images. Shadow-wreathed figures moving through museum corridors, displays shattering in their wake, something dark and hungry searching methodically. They're coming directly here, he gasped as the vision subsided. How would they know where to find us? They must have tracked the energy signature from your collapse in the gallery, Merrick surmised, already moving to the secondary exit at the rear of the office. We need to move now. As they hurried through the service corridors of the museum, emergency lighting casting everything in disorienting shadows, Yusuf found himself functioning with unusual clarity despite the chaos. His senses seemed heightened, hearing detecting subtle movements far beyond normal range, vision adjusting instantly to the low-light conditions, even his sense of dire Session operating with preternatural accuracy. Left at the next junction, he said automatically as they approached an intersection, then immediately questioned how he knew that. He had visited the museum many times but had never accessed these staff-only areas. Ishizu gave him a sharp look but followed his direction without question. The connection is strengthening, she observed quietly. You re-accessing knowledge you shouldn't logically possess. Knowledge of the museum layout seems relatively benign compared to everything else that's happening, Yusuf replied, attempting humor to mask his growing unease. The strange energy continued flowing through him, bringing with it fragments of memories and skills that weren't his own. Most disturbingly, he found himself calculating combat strategies automatically as they moved. Assessing each space for defensive positions and escape routes with the practiced eye of someone trained for conflict. They reached a service elevator that required security clearance. Merrick swiped his badge and entered a complex code. This leads to the conservation levels, he explained as the doors opened. Limited access, reinforced construction original L.Y. designed to protect valuable artifacts during the political upheavals of the past decade. As they entered the elevator, the lights throughout the corridor suddenly extinguished completely, even the emergency systems failing simultaneously. In the moment before the elevator doors closed, Yusuf glimpsed movement at the far end of the hallway, a darkness deeper than mere absence of light, flowing like liquid shadow. They've found us, he said with certainty that came from somewhere beyond his conscious mind. The elevator descended smoothly despite the power disruptions affecting the rest of the building, suggesting backup systems or separate power sources for critical infrastructure. When the doors opened again, they revealed a vast underground complex that more resembled a high-security research facility than a traditional museum conservation area. "Welcome to the Real Cairo Museum," Ishizu said, leading them through automatically sealing doors. "What the public sees is merely the visible portion of our operations." "This is unexpected," Yusuf admitted, taking in the advanced technology and scale of the hidden facility. "I had no idea such infrastructure existed beneath the public institution." Egypt's archaeological heritage includes items of significant metaphysical concern, Ishizu explained as they moved through the complex. The Antiquities Ministry maintains T.'s facility to study artifacts that exhibit unusual properties beyond conventional archaeological significance. Properties like emitting golden energy or causing people to manifest whisker marks. Yusuf suggested wryly. "Among others." "Yes." Ishizu led them into what appeared to be a secure research laboratory, where the alabaster fox statues from the public gallery were already arranged on a special examination platform. "We transferred the most sensitive artifacts here immediately after your incident in the gallery." "Foresight or paranoia?" Amara asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Experience," Merrick corrected grimly. "The Akatsuki Council has targeted our research before, though never this boldly." As they secured the laboratory, Yusuf approached the alabaster statues cautiously. Now that he stood before them again, he could perceive subtle differences between each figure despite their apparently identical construction. They seemed to resonate at different frequencies, an impression that came not through conventional senses but through the strange energy still flowing through his system. "They're keys," he said suddenly, the knowledge emerging from somewhere beyond his conscious mind. "Each statue contains a fragment of the original sealing formula, incomplete individually but powerful when properly aligned." Ishizu and Amara exchanged significant glances. "That aligns with the Edfu texts," Amara confirmed. "But they didn't specify the activation mechanism or proper arrangement." Counterclockwise spiral, starting from the cardinal dire Setion of sunrise at the moment of sealing, Yusuf continued, his hands moving automatically to rearrange the statues. "The formation mirrors the original 9-pointed star used in the ritual." "How could you possibly know that?" Merrick asked, watching with both suspicion and fascination as Yusuf positioned the artifacts with absolute certainty. "I don't," Yusuf admitted, the strange dichotomy of knowing yet not knowing creating cognitive dissonance. "It's as if someone else is providing the information through me." As he placed the final statue in position, the 9 alabaster foxes began to glow with golden light, subtle at first but intensifying steadily. Lines of energy formed between them, creating the 9-pointed star pattern described in the ancient texts. The temperature in the lab oratory dropped noticeably as power built within the formation. "It's working," Amara whispered, scientific skepticism temporarily overwhelmed by the tangible evidence before her. "The sealing formula is reactivating." "Not sealing," Yusuf corrected, though the words didn't feel like his own. "Revealing." The star pattern projected upward, forming a 3-dimensional geometric structure of pure golden energy. Within this construct, an image began to form, the figure of a young man with distinctive facial markings and ceremonial Egyptian regalia that combined traditional elements with foreign influences. Though rendered in golden light rather than physical substance, his features were clearly visible, and strikingly similar to Yusuf's own. "Pharaoh Menefer," Ishizu breathed, recognition. Immediate despite having never seen a definitive historical image of the ruler. The light construct studied them with evident intelligence, its gaze finally settling on Yusuf. When it spoke, the voice resonated with dual tones, one formal and ancient, the other carrying the distinctive energy that had been communicating with Yusuf through impressions and fragmented thoughts. "My descendant awakens at last. The bloodline calls across millennia as the shadows return." Yusuf found himself responding automatically, words forming without conscious decision. The vessel answers, 9-tailed guardian. "What would you have of me?" A slight smile crossed the pharaoh's illuminated features. "Not what I would have, but what we must do together." The seals weaken as they did before. The devourers of light gather their strength. Without intervention, the barrier between worlds will collapse entirely. We've detected energy manifestations consistent with interdimensional weakening, Ishizu confirmed, addressing the apparition directly with remarkable composure given the circumstances. But we don't understand the mechanism or how to counter it. The Pharaoh's projection turned toward her, studying her with evident interest. You bear the sight beyond sight, asterisk asterisk, he observed, apparently perceiving the Millennium Necklace beneath her clothing. The sacred items have found worthy bearers in this age as well. Good. You will be needed when the final confrontation comes. Before further conversation could develop, alarm systems suddenly activated throughout the facility, read Lee. GHTS flashing as security protocols engaged automatically. Perimeter breach, Merrick reported, checking the security monitors. Multiple entry points. They're using some kind of shadow-based phasing technology to bypass physical barriers. Quote, the Pharaoh's projection nodded as if expecting this development. The Akatsuki Council serves the Devourers in this age as Sutek did in mine. They seek the vessels of power, both human and artifact. How do we stop them? Yusuf asked, the strange dual consciousness within him, his modern identity and the awakening connection to something ancient, ting a peculiar clarity despite the crisis. We complete the connection, asterisk asterisk, the Pharaoh replied simply. The fragmented seals were never meant as permanent imprisonment but as protection until bloodline produced another compatible vessel. That time has come. The implications registered immediately with all present. You're suggesting full manifestation of whatever entity was sealed in these artifacts, Amara stated. Her analytical mind cutting through metaphysical terminology to the practical outcome. Using Yusuf as the vessel. Not, whatever entity, asterisk asterisk, the Pharaoh corrected with a hint of amusement. Kurama. Known as a pep in my time. The nine-tailed fox spirit whose power once balanced the pantheon itself. Yusuf felt momentary panic at the suggestion of becoming host to some ancient supernatural entity. His scientific training rebelled against the very concept, yet the evidence surrounding him, the manifesting energy, the pursuing shadow wielders, the apparent communication with a 3,000-year-old pharaoh, couldn't be dismissed through conventional explanations. What happens to me if I agree? He asked, the practical question emerging from his modern consciousness rather than the awakening connection. The Pharaoh's projection regarded him with surprising compassion. Partnership, not possession. Your consciousness remains your own, enhanced rather than replaced. I remained myself throughout my reign, though forever changed by the connection. Security monitors showed the shadow entities penetrating deeper into the facility, moving with unnatural speed and coordination. Time for deliberation was rapidly diminishing. If I refuse, Yusuf pressed, needing to understand his options despite the crisis. Then we seek another vessel, Huff, the compatibility of your bloodline is rare. The Akatsuki will still target you for elimination, having detected the partial connection already established. And the barriers between worlds will continue to weaken without intervention. Presented with this stark assessment, Yusuf's scientific mind proceeded to logical conclusion despite the extraordinary premises. If these phenomena were real, and all evidence suggested they were, then the rational choice was clear, regardless of how it violated his previous understanding of reality. I consent, he said simply. What must I do? The Pharaoh's projection nodded with evident approval. Place your hands at the center of the formation. Accept what flows through you without resistance. The transition may be intense. As Yusuf moved toward the star pattern formed by the alabaster statues, Ishizu stepped forward. Wait, she urged. Once this process begins, there may be no reversing it. Are you certain? Yusuf appreciated her concern but found his resolve surprisingly firm. If what we're experiencing is real, and I can no longer rationalize it as anything else, then refusing would be both personally dangerous and potentially catastrophic on a larger scale. He offered a slight smile. Besides, what archaeologist wouldn't risk everything to communicate directly with the ancient world they've spent their life studying? An excellent point, Amara acknowledged with unexpected warmth. Though I recommend documenting the experience thoroughly for future research, assuming we survive whatever comes next. I'll keep that in mind, Yusuf replied. Genuine appreciation for her unwavering scholarly perspective providing momentary normalcy amid the extraordinary circumstances. He turned back to the formation, where The golden energy continued building in intensity. Following the pharaoh's instructions, he placed his hands at the center of the nine-pointed star. Immediately, energy surged up his arms, not painful but overwhelming in its sensory impact. Golden light enveloped him completely as the alabaster statues began to vibrate, resonating at increasing frequency. Within the light, Yusuf found himself in a mindscape disconnected from physical reality, a vast desert beneath a star-filled sky unlike any constellation pattern known to modern astronomy. Before him stood two figures, the pharaoh from the projection, now fully realized in this mental landscape, and beside him a massive fox with 9 flowing tails, its fur the color of molten gold and eyes reflecting ancient wisdom. "We meet directly at last, descendant." The pharaoh addressed him. "I am Menefer, once ruler of the 2 lands, partner to the 9-tailed one. And I am Karama, ****. The fox introduced itself, voice resonating with power that transcended language. "Known to your ancestors as a pep, to others as the 9-tailed fox. I have waited millennia for a vessel of compatible resonance." "Why me?" Yusuf asked, the fundamental question underlying everything else. Out of millions of possible descendants, why now and why me specifically? The conjunction of bloodline, spiritual capacity, and cosmic alignment, ****, Menefer explained. Your scientific training provides analytical framework your ancestors lacked. Your archaeological knowledge offers context for understanding what you'll experience. And most importantly, your essential nature mirrors my own. The capacity for partnership rather than dominance. The massive fox studied Yusuf with evident assessment. "You question everything. Even now, I end this space beyond conventional reality." "Good. Blind acceptance breeds vulnerability. Partnership requires mutual respect and ongoing evaluation." "What exactly would this partnership entail?" Yusuf pressed, his academic thoroughness asserting itself even in this extraordinary context. "Access to my power and knowledge when needed, ****, Karama explained. Enhanced physical capabilities. Perception beyond conventional human senses. The ability to manipulate energy in ways your science cannot yet explain but will eventually quantify. In exchange, ****, Menefer continued, you pravi. The physical form through which Karama can interact with your world, and moral guidance to balance power with responsibility. And the current threat, these, devourers of light, and the Akatsuki Council, entities that exist between conventional dimensions, ****, Karama explained, tails moving with subtle agitation. They feed on spiritual energy, what your ancestors called soul essence. They cannot fully manifest in your reality without assistance, which is why they require human agents like the Akatsuki Council. In my time, we sealed them away along with Karama's power, ****, Menefer added. A temporary measure at best. Now the cosmic alignment that facilitated their first attempt at crossing over returns. Without intervention, they will establish permanent bridgeheads in your reality. The implications were staggering, interdimensional entities threatening not just Egypt but potentially all human civilization. Yet even in this metaphysical landscape, Yusuf's scientific mind continued analyzing. Seeking verification rather than simply accepting supernatural claims. These entities, can they be studied? Understood through some framework beyond mythology and mysticism. The fox's expression shifted to something resembling approval. Always the scholar. Yes, they operate according to principles your physics is beginning to recognize: quantum entanglement, dimensional folding, energy-matter conversion. Your scientists have glimpsed the edges of these concepts but lack context for full comprehension. Which is why this partnership matters, ****, Menefer concluded. My experience with these entities combined with your modern scientific understanding creates possibility for permanent resolution rather than temporary containment. In the physical world, seconds had passed while this mental exchange unfolded across subjective hours. The golden energy continued building around Yusuf's form as the alabaster statues vibrated at increasing intensity. Pharaoh, the laboratory's security monitors, Merrick, Ishizu and Amara watched shadow entities penetrating the final security barriers, moments away from breaching the laboratory itself. Within the mindscape, Yusuf reached his decision, not through mystical acceptance but through rational evaluation of the evidence presented and likely outcomes of various choices. I accept the partnership, he stated firmly. With conditions. My consciousness remains primary in my own body, all knowledge gained is documented for scientific understanding where possible, and our actions prioritize minimizing harm to innocence regardless of metaphysical objectives. The fox's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. Boundaries and ethical frameworks from the outset. You are indeed Menifer's descendant in spirit as well as blood. Then let it be so. Menifer declared, placing his hand on Yusuf's shoulder. My consciousness will provide context and historical knowledge but not override your own. The transition between our time periods created fragments and gaps. Your experiences will help restore coherence. The massive fox approached, its form beginning to dissolve into pure golden energy. Prepare yourself, vessel. The union of mortal and divine requires adjustment. As the fox's energy flowed into him, Yusuf experienced sudden, overwhelming input across all sensory channels, memories spanning millennia. Knowledge of languages never studied, combat skills never trained, and most dramatically, perception of energy patterns underlying physical reality. The sheer volume of information threatened to overwhelm his consciousness before adaptive patterns established themselves, creating frameworks that allowed his mind to process the influx without fragmentation. In the physical world, the laboratory doors burst inward as shadow-wreathed figures entered, humanoid forms surrounded by darkness deeper than natural shadow. They moved with unnatural coordination, weapons RMED from condensed darkness extending from their limbs. Secure the artifacts and eliminate witnesses, commanded their leader, a tall figure whose features remained obscured behind a mask decorated with red cloud patterns. The vessel must not complete the bonding process. Too late, they realized that the golden energy surrounding Yusuf had reached critical threshold. The alabaster statues shattered simultaneously, releasing their remaining sealed power in a massive surge that coalesced around him. His body lifted from the ground, suspended within a cocoon of golden light that rapidly took shape around him, forming the spectral outline of a massive nine-tailed fox. When his eyes opened, they had transformed completely. Irises shifted from brown to crimson, pupils elongated into vertical slits. The whisker markings on his cheeks darkened and deepened, and when he spoke, his voice carried the same dual resonance they had heard from the Pharaoh's projection. You seek what you cannot control, servants of shadow. He addressed the intruders. The nine-tailed one chooses his own vessel. Your masters shall not claim this power. The lead Akatsuki figure took a step backward. The first sign of uncertainty in their otherwise coordinated assault. Impossible, they hissed. The bonding process requires the complete set of sealing vessels and specific astronomical alignment. Your intelligence is outdated, Yusuf Karama replied, golden energy swirling more intensely around his form. The vessels were never the source but merely the containers. The power returns to its rightful partnership. With movements too swift for normal human perception, he extended one hand toward the intruders. Golden energy lanced outward in precisely controlled streams, targeting the shadow manifestations rather than their human hosts. Where the energy touched darkness, it created a reaction similar to matter meeting antimatter, mutual annihilation that separated the shadow entities from their vessels without harming the humans themselves. The Akatsuki agents collapsed as their shadow enhancements dissipated, leaving only unconscious human forms where threatening entities had stood moments before. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 10 seconds from breach to resolution. The golden energy receded gradually, drawing back into Yusuf's form until only the whisk markings and subtly altered eyes remained as visible evidence of the transformation. He swayed slightly, the enormous energy expenditure taking its toll despite the enhanced capabilities. Ishizu moved forward to steady him. Are you still Yusuf? She asked cautiously. He nodded, though his expression reflected the profound disorientation of someone processing dual consciousness. Yes, though, expanded would be the accurate term. I retain all my memories and identity, but I've gained access to knowledge and experiences that aren't originally mine. He glanced toward the unconscious Akatsuki agents. They'll survive. The shadow entities used them as vessels but hadn't completely subsumed their original personalities. You neutralized them without causing permanent harm, Merrick observed, already implementing security protocols to contain the unconscious intruders. Impressive restraint for a first manifestation. Partnership rather than possession, Yusuf explained. The Ao's words now carrying personal meaning. Kurama provides power and capabilities, but moral framework and decision-making remain mine. He paused, processing internal dialogue invisible to others. Ours, he amended. Amara approached the shattered remains of the alabaster statues, examining them with scholarly interest despite the extraordinary circumstances. The vessels completely depleted their stored energy, she observed. According to the texts, that should be impossible without performing the counter-ritual at specific power nodes throughout Egypt. The vessels were never the true containers, Yusuf explained. Knowledge flowing from his connection to both Menefer and Kurama. They were anchors for a distributed sealing network. When a compatible bloodline descendant made contact, they became redundant. Ishizu studied him with evident fascination, both scholarly and personal. How much of Pharaoh Menefer's consciousness do you retain? Fragments rather than complete transfer. He replied after brief internal consultation. The transition between time periods created discontinuities. I have access to key memories and knowledge but not his complete life experience. He smiled slightly. Enough to understand the historical context but not enough to lose my own identity in his. And the entity, Kurama or Apep? Merrick asked, his tone suggesting greater concern about this aspect. Present but contained, Yusuf assured him. More like an internal advisor than a controlling force. The partnership Menefer established 3,000 years ago provides the template for our current arrangement. Before further discussion could develop, facility security systems indicated additional incoming threats, multiple shadow manifestations converging on the museum from different directions. The Akatsuki Council has committed significant resources to this operation, Merrick observed grimly. These unconscious agents represent only their first deployment. We need to relocate immediately, Ishizu decided. This facility is compromised, and we require secure space to process what's happened and determine next steps. The Ishtar compound outside Alexandria, Merrick suggested. Traditional protections combined with modern security measures. Yusuf nodded, new knowledge integrating with his existing understanding. The shadow entities can track the energy signature I'm now emanating. He informed them. Distance alone won't provide security without proper containment measures. The compound includes shielding designed specifically for artifacts exhibiting unusual energy patterns. Ishizu assured him. It should provide temporary protection while we develop long-term strategies. As they prepared for evacuation through secondary escape routes, Yusuf experienced another flash of information from his newly established connections, images of similar awakenings occurring across the globe, other vessels responding to the weakening interdimensional barriers. I'm not the only one. He realized aloud. Others with compatible bloodlines are experiencing awakening events. I can sense them, somehow. The texts mentioned vessels across the great waters, Amara recalled. We assumed it referred to Mediterranean connections, but perhaps the distribution is more global than we realized. We'll need to locate these others, Ishizu decided. If are experiencing similar manifestations without context or support, they could be vulnerable to Akatsuki manipulation or worse. Yusuf nodded, the dual perspective of modern scholar and ancient Pharaoh providing unique insight into their situation. The convergence has begun, he stated with certainty born from knowledge beyond his original understanding. What happened 3,000 years ago will repeat, but with different players and potentially different outcomes. Optimistic or pessimistic different? Amara asked pragmatically as they moved toward the evacuation route. Yusuf glanced down at his hands, where golden energy still shimmered faintly beneath his skin. Visible evidence of something that transcended conventional scientific explanation yet operated according to principles that could, theoretically, be studied and understood. That depends entirely on what we do with the knowledge and power now available to us, he replied, embracing both the scientific caution of Yusuf Nazari and the strategic awareness of Pharaoh Menefer. History provides the pattern but not the predetermined outcome. As they escaped the museum through ancient tunnels predating the modern structure, pathways Yusuf somehow knew intimately despite never having traversed them before, he found himself operating in a state of unusual clarity despite the chaotic circumstances. The partnership had initially seemed terrifying now offered perspective beyond what either consciousness could achieve independently. Watching him navigate the ancient passages with confidence born from borrowed memories, Ishizu moved closer to Amara. What do you think? She asked quietly. Is he still himself? The linguist observed Yusuf with scholarly assessment. His speech patterns retain individual characteristics despite the integrated knowledge. His ethical frameworks appear intact based on his handling of the Akatsuki agents. And most tellingly, she gestured toward where he had stopped to exa. Mine hieroglyphics carved into the tunnel wall, automatically documenting them with his phone despite the crisis situation. His academic instincts remain unchanged. Ahead of them, Yusuf smiled ghtly as he overheard their analysis with his enhanced senses. The scholar he had always been remained, now complemented by knowledge and capabilities that would allow him to pursue understanding beyond conventional limitations. Whatever came next, interdimensional threats, ancient powers, or personal transformation, he would face it with the combined perspectives of modern science and ancient wisdom. And somewhere deep within his consciousness, both Kurama and Menifer approved of this balanced approach, exactly the partnership they had sought across 3,000 years of patient waiting. Half a world away, in a modern high-rise overlooking Tokyo's financial district, a young woman named Mitsuki Uzumaki stared in shock at her bathroom mirror. 3 whisker-like markings had appeared on each cheek overnight, and her normally dark eyes occasionally flashed crimson when emotions ran high. "What's happening to me?" she whispered, fingers tracing the markings that refused to wash away. In her mind, fragmentary images flickered: golden desert sands, massive fox tails sweeping across night skies, and most persistently, a young pharaoh with markings identical to her own, reaching across time with urgent purpose. As dawn broke over Tokyo, golden energy briefly manifested around her reflection before dissipating again, one more vessel awakening as ancient powers stirred once more. Across a world unprepared for their return. Chapter 3 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.